read the rules of the road and we'll quickly get to our item.
Sure. Yeah. So again, this is just the normal downtown flats design review. We had our normal virtual meeting procedures. Any community comments come to
Tom
me.
Yablonski's here also.
You got it. Thank you, Tom. It's on the record. Any comments come to me by the day before at my email or phone number. Those comments are made to the committee, and the committee uses those to deliberate. The applicants do not have to reply directly to the comments. This is a meeting that is conducted by Robert's Rules of Order. Actions are taken by voice vote, yes or no. Abstentions should be announced. No day of presentation submissions. So the schedule is that we have a very brief meeting. The chair is beginning the meeting now. I'm going to introduce this first joint two projects. I'll turn it over to the applicants, and the presentation will conclude. They'll hear any public comments and take a vote. So with that, I will open this first case. So they're presenting this together for the Front International Cleveland Triennial. It's in two downtown locations. There is two motions that are going to have to be done. There's one conceptual mural on the standard building wall, which is a local landmark, but the Landmarks Commission Secretary deems that since it is more, the audience of that mural is more in the downtown flats design review district. That's why it's coming here, but that will be going to Landmarks Commission. And then there is a public art piece that consists of fountains that's seeking a final. So they will be presented at Planning Commission and Landmarks at 6.3 and 6.9. And with that, I'll hand it over to the team from Front and Land Studio.
I know that Tara Petras is here. I don't know, Tara, if you want to say anything in advance of Fred taking over.
Just that I'm supportive of the projects. The one for conceptual, I'll just hold off comment because we haven't seen a concept yet. But I know it's gotten a lot of support from the surrounding stakeholders. As for the fountains, I'm in support of as well. And again, this is the second iteration of the Front Triennial, which was introduced to our city and region back in 2018 and garnered quite a bit of national, international attention and added to the local economy. And because of the pandemic, slowing things down, we weren't able to do it last year. So the triennial is coming to us in 2022. So I want to turn that over to Fred Bitwell and from Front International, and Greg Peckham and Joe Lanzalotta from Land Studio. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tara, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to run through very quickly a few quick slides to remind you what Front is. If we can have the next slide. It's a project that's designed to generate new economic activity through arts tourism in Cleveland, enhance the brand of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio as a cultural and intellectual hub, and to develop an even stronger and more vibrant ecosystem for our arts organizations, particularly important in 2022, since all of our partners in the arts community have taken some very significant hits in the past 2 years. So it's a 3-month-long exhibition of contemporary art that happens in over 30 locations across Cleveland and also in Akron and Oberlin, and features hundreds of artists at the cutting edge of contemporary art from around the world. Next slide. It's based on a collaboration with our presenting partners. There are actually 11 arts and educational institutions that are exhibiting partners in this project. It's unprecedented, and it's a real testimony to the strength of our community. Next slide. As I said, it's a 3-month-long exhibition of contemporary art from around the world. This is a shot from Cleveland Museum of Art. Next slide. In 2018, we had 130 artists, 28 venues, over 400 works of art in 3 cities all across Northeast Ohio. Here's Brett Hall at the Cleveland Public Library. And we had great visitorship. Next slide. Over 250,000 exhibition visits by more than 90,000 unique visitors. Next slide. And it was truly made Cleveland an international cultural destination. About 30,000 visitors came from across the nation and more than 25 countries. Next slide. And Front was was in 2018 and will continue to be fully engaged in our community. I'd like to remind you of this terrific project we did in collaboration with Famicos Foundation in Cleveland, the Cleveland Foundation on East 105th Street. It was our artistic hub in 2018, the Madison. Next slide. And we generated real results for Cleveland. Cleveland State University's economic impact study measured a 30 million plus economic impact, and we generated the equivalent of $38 million in public relations value for the city and our institutions. Next slide. So, Front International 2022, it opens July 16th to the public this year. Next slide. Its theme is "O Gods of Dust and Rainbows," which is an homage to a line from a poem by Langston Hughes. And the ideas that the exhibition deals with is all about the idea of art and art making can be a form of therapy, a path to healing, a way to deal with trauma and to come out the other side with collective joy. Through dust, there can be rainbows. And that's a very appropriate theme, obviously, for Cleveland and the rest of the world coming off of the last 2 years. Next slide. A shot of the poem. Next slide. So we're going to talk about 2 projects today, and I'm going to introduce the first one by Cooking Sections. And then I'll talk about the Julie Moretu project at the Standard Building. So Cooking Sections is a UK-based artistic collective led by Daniel Pasquale and Alan Schwabe. Cooking Sections, widely praised internationally. They're based in London. They recently were nominated for shortlisted for the Turner Prize, which is internationally sort of the most recognized arts prize for artists working in the UK. They're very involved in environmental issues, and this project is right in their sort of sweet spot of their area of interest. A past project included them helping the Tate Modern, which is the biggest museum in the UK, move away from farmed salmon. So not only do they do artistic projects that can be sort of absorbed as an art experience, but they're very interested in tangible results that change the world. This project deals with the issue of hypoxia. Here is a shot of Lake Erie in the summer, and as we know, there's a severe hypoxia problem in the lake. Algae blooms fed by agricultural toxic waste runoff. And this project is an attempt to address that, not just to condemn those who may be responsible for damaging our lake, but actually to recognize those who are saving the lake. And so what they have proposed is a series of fountains in the North Coast Harbor that are named after farmers that have embraced sustainable agricultural practices to reduce hypoxia in the lake. So each of these fountains would be named after one of those farms. And we sort of love that sort of positivity and proactive nature of this project that leads to hope. Even though we have dust, yes, there can be rainbows. This is the opening of a long-term project. We are partnering with Spaces Gallery. And over the next 3 years, they will be working with Spaces and farmers in the area to raise awareness of this issue and to encourage more farmers to embrace sustainable practices. So I'd like to turn this over to Joe Lanzalotta from Land to talk about the specifics of how this project will unfold.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, everyone. You can go to the next slide. So as you can see here, this is just a series of 3 fountains. Or I'm sorry, 5 fountains, 3 3/4 horsepower fountains and 2 1 horsepower fountains. Next slide. At the bottom, you can see the different array of fountains they're going to use. Next slide. Oh, okay. You can go back to the previous slide. So these fountains will be installed by a company called Jones Fish, and the power will be attached within the Mather, and we'll have that work done by Lake Erie Electric.
I should point out that this is a temporary project. In other words, it will last through the run of the show. July, it will be installed in early July and be deinstalled shortly after October 2nd, which is the last day of the show.
Correct. And we're currently working with Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Dan Roth, who's helping us figure out kind of the permitting with any kind of Army Corps of Engineers. So we have a permit we'll be submitting to them. We're working also with the Great Lakes Science Center. As I said, we'll be attaching the electrical components inside of the Mather, so everything will be housed in there. Jones Fish is running the cabling to the fountains and actually installing the fountains, which are essentially tethered to the floor of the harbor and weighted down. So this company, Jones Fish, has worked with the Cleveland Metro Parks. They do a lot of work in this region and beyond. They have a number of locations around Ohio. So they are very familiar with this kind of work and this area.
And I should have pointed out that not only will this be a great way to draw attention to this important environmental issue, but it's actually going to improve the quality of the North Coast Harbor because it will be aerating the water. So
yeah, correct. There was also talk about debris in this location and how it becomes quite problematic, and so there was also an interest in this installation from a standpoint of it actually helping to clear out debris and keep debris out of this area. So while it is something that is slated as temporary, it was an idea that had legs beyond just front, potentially.
Some questions for you if that's the end of the presentation.
yes.
Is there, first of all, did you have any public comment on this, Dro?
No.
Okay. Is there lighting associated with this project?
There is not, no. Other
And,
than the lighting that's already down
and
there.
how will people know? Is there some sort of plaque, or how are people going to learn the story of this project?
Yeah, we're working on signage that would be located around the installation. So either
In multiple locations, presumably?
presumably, yes. I think probably around the entry points of the space. So by the Mather and also by the bridge.
And I presume that this is going to be moored, that these will be tethered to each other so that they remain in the configuration that they're intended in, and also to the anchored somehow so that they're not moving. Is it going to be necessary to keep kayakers and other people, canoers and others away from this, or is that not an issue?
So that's something that Dan Roth at DCA has been helping us explore with some of the other stakeholders down there. We don't yet have an answer on that or how that will happen if it needs to happen. We did discuss, buoys and things like that could potentially warn small craft from going back there, but we're not even sure if that is an issue at this point.
I think we can leave all of that to administrative folks to deal with, from the purview of this committee. First of all, thank you guys for doing this, and this is such important work, and it's been so good for the city. So this will be a great project. I would open this up for comments from our design review committee.
This is Tom Zarfas. When this is over, are you renting these pumps? Are you buying them? And when it's over, what happens to them?
So we are buying them. We did inquire about renting pumps, and apparently it's something that there isn't much of a market for, at least is what we've been told. But Fred, I'll let you handle that.
Yeah, yes, it's not economical to rent them, so we are going to buy them. As I said earlier, there is a long-term life to this project, as Cooking Sections works with Spaces Gallery over a 3-year period to sort of continue this artistic and social conversation. So I think there's a possibility that these fountains may be reused over that period of time. There's no specific plan in place, but we will not immediately discard them. We'll store them and see what other kind of reuse, whether by us or by someone else, so that we're not just sort of discarding equipment.
I'll just jump in there real quick. This is Greg at Land. The Great Lakes Science Center has taken a pretty significant interest in this project, just because it has educational value from their standpoint, and not to mention it's right outside their door. And so they have actually said that they might be interested in the acquiring the equipment after the installation is over. So that's sort of a nearby neighbor that is kind of stepping up. So we could certainly see them having some sort of extended life through the Science Center.
It's not a ridiculously expensive installation in the first place, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are there other comments from the panel? And if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Yes, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if there's going to be some sort of sign that accompanies this to explain the subject and kind of bring a little bit more awareness to the topic that you're showing here.
We did discuss that, Krista, and they said that there are going to be multiple signs around this location to indicate people what that's going to be, and that signage will come back to Dro and for administrative approval. If he needs to consult with us on it, they will do that.
Thank you.
This is Jeff Bogart. I will make a motion to approve this project if there's no other comments from the panel.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
I'll second Tom Geist.
Thank you, Tom. There's been a motion and a second to approve. Are there any further questions or comments? Hearing none, Dro, would you please call the roll?
Bialowski,
Yes.
Bogart,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Geist,
Yes.
Pisarcik,
Yes.
Schwartzberg,
Yes.
Soltis,
Yes.
Yablonsky,
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion is carried. Let's go to the next piece.
Thank you. The next project we want to talk about is a proposed mural by the artist Julie Moretu on the Standard Building, and we're seeking conceptual approval here. This is a major project of very significant investment, and so we're seeking conceptual approval now so that we can move forward with confidence on developing the creative design, which will be developed later this year. Next slide. Julie Moretu is undoubtedly, at least many would say, Julie is America's most famous painter. She is a remarkable person who grew up in Ethiopia, fled to Michigan when she was a teenager from the Civil War there, and completed her education in the United States. She is a renowned abstract painter. She's recently, at a very young age, honored with a career retrospective that opened at the Whitney Museum in New York and traveled to the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art this past year. She's highly sought after. She has set an auction record last year, selling a painting for $6.5 million. She has agreed very generously to participate with Front, and at our opening, she will actually curate a show at the Cleveland Museum of Art, showing paintings by herself and paired with objects chosen by her from the museum's collection. We have shown her, as part of the development of that project, the Standard Building. As you recall, Front created 3 murals between Playhouse Square and Public Square in our 2018 edition, part of a long-term commitment that we call Canvas City to make downtown Cleveland the largest outdoor exhibition of contemporary museum quality abstract painting. And so this would be a continuation of that project. The Plain Dealer covered it on the front page. We've had enthusiastic support from the stakeholders, Weston, which is the building owner, Old Stone Church, which provides this sort of dramatic foreground of that building, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Destination Cleveland, the mayor's office. So we're very excited about this project. Next slide. This has an extremely important location right on the front steps of Cleveland Public Square. This blank wall has been a bit of an eyesore, or at least a void in the view shed for many, many years. It was obviously never intended to be a blank wall. So this is an opportunity for us to activate this this important landmark. Julie was attracted to this because of obviously its incredible sort of impressive size and scope, visual impact, but also because of its historic location, literally at the crossroads of all of Cleveland's history, and especially the Underground Railroad. Although Julie is an abstract painter, she works from reality. Her paintings are literally built up layer by layer, working with reference works like maps, diagrams, architectural plans, photographs, layered many, many layers, one on top of the other, to create what's finally an abstraction, and yet the origin of those abstractions always have stories behind them. Julie wants to come to Cleveland, do some community engagement work, do research, further research on the history and stories of this site, and then complete a design, hopefully by the end of this calendar year, which would put us at we would of course bring before this group for approval, with the idea that it would be executed in summer of 2023. This project would be a 10-year commitment. In other words, Front would engage with the artist and the building owner to protect and maintain the painting for 10 years. That agreement would be renewable, or we would, if it is not renewed for whatever reason, we would return the wall of the building to its original condition, painted over. Is there a next slide? Just another shot here. And then finally, yes, here's the proposed mural location. This is a vast project. Our estimate is that the cost to produce the project, including artist fees, is about $500,000. We do have a commitment from one of our board members he is pledged a matching grant, so he is pledged half of that cost. And so with that pledge in hand, we're highly confident that we will raise the remainder of the money to complete the project. I guess that's my presentation. I'd love to hear your comments or questions.
Thank you, Fred. It's an extraordinary undertaking. Has there been any public comment on this to you?
It's terrific.
No, Mr. Chair, but this is going to Landmarks, and the admin for Landmarks, Carl Burgess, has some slides that he shows to the commission showing the historic condition of the building. So there are a few slides from him too, and he was planning on speaking on that, but no public comments.
Let's call on Carl then.
Okay.
Thank you, Drew.
Drew, could you, this has been a designated Cleveland landmark since 1979, and this will go before the Landmarks Commission next week. And as a part of this, they will be using the Secretary of the Interior standards as to see if this is an appropriate location and what the visual impact on not only the church, but also the illuminating building, which is also on the National Register of Historic Places. So this has always been a blank wall, but there is a historic image here of that has been a painted sign on this facade before. Should note that when the standard building was restored, they received historic tax credits, and that is still within the 5-year look back period. And this would not be able to be started until about mid-May of 2023.
That's when those burn off?
Yes. Next, Drew, please. And then just a couple more. It's an exciting project.
Do you have any sense as to how it would be received based on the Secretary of the Interior's standards?
Myself, I don't know how the commission is going to act. Myself personally, I act a bit conservative when it comes to stuff like this. So it's hard to make a judgment without knowing what the artwork is going to be. I have asked for the State Historic Preservation Office to give some feedback on this as well. I have not yet heard back from them. Hopefully I will too. But I think that's part of what really needs to be considered as a part of this. Had they proposed it where the original Signage was, I don't think we have that much of an issue because there is a history of there being a painted sign there. It's just the larger one, I think.
I
it's gonna
appreciate
depend.
that, Carl, and I think that's why this committee needs to weigh in on the appropriateness of this, because those standards are, in my opinion, far too narrow relative to, you know, how to think about what was never intended to be a blank facade in the first place, and what signage was there, which is actually a billboard that's advertising, as opposed to a piece of public art that is actually going to enhance the public's, you know, enjoyment and perception of this historic area. So I think that those are some of the things that this committee should be considering as part of a conceptual approval. Committee members, what are your feelings about this?
I was going to inquire as to whether the applicant had considered if they were going to paint directly on the wall or if there was going to be some sort of medium that they were painting and then attaching to the building.
Great question. It will be painted directly on the wall. We conducted some extensive research on what is necessary to execute this at the level of quality that would be acceptable to the artist and have the permanence and sort of durability to last without maintenance or restoration for at least a 10-year period. So we actually have engaged with a company out of Brooklyn, New York, called Colossal Media, which is sort of it is the recognized expert nationally in painting large-scale murals. They will paint this entirely by hand using paint, special formula paint that they've developed. We've also reached out to Sherwin Williams, and they've offered to help us with the right chemicals and coatings for both the primer coat and then the protective overcoat. So we're confident that we've found sort of the right consultants and the right supplier to create something that will last and have brilliance for the period of the project.
Is there potential for it to last significantly longer than 10 years, Fred?
Yes, and we would design the agreement to be renewable. The 10, creating sort of a time span allows us to sort of evaluate us at the all the stakeholders, the building owner, the artist, front, all the stakeholders in the neighborhood to sort of evaluate is this one, is the condition of the painting acceptable, and if it needs repair, then we will invest in the repair before the agreement can be renewed. And two, is the mural still appropriate, wanted, needed, by the community?
Great, thank you. Other comments from the panel?
Yeah, this is Keith. I think that with this particular artist and I mean, how world renowned she is, I mean, I think no matter what, it's going to be an incredible aesthetic enhancement to downtown. And I would trust her aesthetic ability to make that happen over my own. But as a member of Design Review, I feel strongly that we should support it. I understand it's a complicated project, but I just am wondering if our support, to a certain extent, as a committee from the city, would help make this happen. So, I mean, I very much support the project.
Thank you, Keith. Others?
Mr. Chair, we have two raised hands, one from Director Huang and one from Tara.
Director Hong? Joyce, are you there?
Oh, that might have been from earlier. Sorry.
No, it
Oh.
was me. No, I did
Oh.
want to say something. I was, of course, muted. Well, I just want to say that I really believe this project will be very additive to the downtown area, specifically around Public Square. Colossal Media is very well respected in regards to its application, and I really believe that public art will liven and inspire this space. And while there are, the historic placements of the former ad or the former sign, I really believe that the larger proposed space is something I highly support. So, thank you.
Thank you. Tara?
Thank you. I echo what Director Wong just said, and I had conversation with Carl about this as well. I feel strongly that the mural should take up the majority of the wall as opposed to where the signage was before. When looking at the historic photos, I felt like the signage looked like billboards and was distracting from the church and the wall and didn't complement the space. I think the full wall mural will be a beautiful backdrop to the church, and like the director said, will inspire. So I just think that having something small would look out of scale. And if we have the opportunity to bring in artists like Julie Murray to do something impactful here, I think the full wall would be much more impactful than a section of the wall.
Thank you, Tara. I'm pretty sure we wouldn't approve that sign if it was presented before us now to be put on this building as something new. I'm in agreement. I would entertain a motion
Well, Jack, this is Jeff Bogart. I have some comments. First, before we get to that point, please. I'm in support of public art like this. I think, Mr. Bidwell, you've done a great job in finding a terrific artist to do this. But as an architect, it's just not my DNA to paint brick. Brick is more porous than people think that it is, and it does breathe. And even the best intentions of a super company like Sherwin-Williams and experts with paints, things can go wrong. I would be a lot more amenable if this were put on some type of a medium, which we've had done around town before in very large, I'll call it a canvas because I'm not sure exactly what the medium is, and stretched across buildings. I think you really should look at that, especially since you have a 10-year commitment, and then hopefully this will be around for a lot longer. But it would allow you to do a lot more with something that could be removable and replaced instead of having to put a huge scaffold up on this building to try and paint that masonry wall. And then if something goes wrong, you've got a terrible problem on your hands. And the building may have some issues if the paint isn't breathable and that wall needs to breathe for, purposes of environmental quality. So my only issue really is I think this should be on some type of a medium on this wall.
Is that wall painted at present?
No, it is not.
Other comments?
This is Tom Zarfas. I'm inclined to agree with Jeff. They do remarkable things on these fabrics, and we've seen them already. And when we get tired of it, we can trade it to the Lakers or something. But it just seems like that's a viable option.
From my experience I have used these materials. They are not as long lasting. They will fade. They are much more impermanent. I have used this on large parking garage at Crocker Park and other places, a vinyl mesh like that. Fred, did you explore this?
Yeah, we did explore it, and I'll be the first to say that the sort of technical side of this is way above my pay grade. But I think the critical issue that we quickly, saw was a digital reproduction would not be acceptable to the artist. She would not approve it as a digital output on a substrate because she feels that it would not accurately represent her intentions. She is a painter. She's not a graphic designer.
Mr.
So
Bidwell, could she not paint some type of a fabric or medium that could be stretched on this building?
Yeah, Fred, I can jump in. This is Greg at Line Studio.
Yeah.
We did go down. I mean, we've gone in a lot of different directions trying to figure this out. I mean, I think we cannot undersell the complexity of doing something at this scale. And that's, cost is almost secondary to the ability of how we can get the lifespan that's expected out of this. We did look at different fabrics and meshes and things like that. The support structure and the amount of penetrations into the building that would be necessary to support something like that at this height and at this scale with these, so the environmental, the wind impacts and those types of things. I mean, we would be just anchoring, inch by inch across this building in multiple locations to create a support structure that would be capable of withstanding something like this. And I think to Jack's point, the things that even the best of scenarios around parking garages and things like that. Fred lives across the street from Hingetown, and that parking garage has a beautiful mural that has failed multiple times due to environmental conditions. I will say with Colossal Media and Sherwin Williams together, I think that we have the technical team and sort of the in terms of products and production who can do this, at a scale that probably, can only be done by, a handful of people in the world. So I think we feel pretty confident in the capabilities of the team that we've put together so far to pull this off.
Mechanical fastenings would probably be more destructive actually than the paint.
Yeah, I mean, Jack, it would literally, we have looked at it, and this is probably 2 to 3 times the size of the formerly known as LeBron banner.
Right.
So, I mean, and if you just look at what it takes to support that, it's a massive, massive amount of infrastructure that is attached to the building. And, quite honestly, I don't think the building owner would be interested in us, doing that much penetration of the masonry.
There's a comment from Tom
Yes.
Struinsky. I want to recognize Tom if he wants to speak to it.
Thanks, Chairman. Like I said in the chat, there are breathable paints out there, and then I trust Greg and Fred and the team to do what's appropriate for that to address Mr. Bogart's question. And since I have the floor, I'll just chime in quickly that Downtown Cleveland Alliance very much supports this project and how it'll enhance downtown and liven it from an art standpoint. To the extent that we've worked with Greg and Fred on community outreach to both Old Stone Church and Standard Building, and then had a meeting with all the property owners around Public Square. And there's very much support around this. And I think from a historic preservation standpoint, who maybe leans differently from my friend Carl, that's more on the cautious liberal on preservation. I think this would be a great project in Old Stone Church. Their board supports this project as well, and I think it'll be a great asset to the community.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other comments? Go
Tara
ahead,
has her hand raised.
I'll
Thank you,
recognize Tara.
Yeah, I would just like to add with regard to longevity of the painted surface. I would just reference the John Francis Mural mural at East 9th and Rockwell, which was originally installed in 1969, and it was 24 years later in 1993 that it first had to be restored, and was most recently restored last year. So I think that the better option is to paint directly onto the surface versus the logistics of creating something that's attached to the building. So I just wanted to bring that up in addition to what Tom said about the breathable paints.
Thank you, Tara. I'm going to entertain a motion to approve this conceptually if someone is willing to make it.
This is Keith. I would propose that we accept and approve this project as presented.
Is there a second?
Yablonsky, I'll second it.
Are there any further questions or comments? Hearing none, Dro, I would ask you to call the roll.
Bialowski,
Yes.
Bogart,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Geist,
Yes.
Pisarcik,
Yes.
Schwartzberg,
Enthusiastic, yes.
enthusiastic, yes. Soltis,
Yes.
Yablonsky,
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Bro, please, when you present this to Landmarks, would you make sure they know that this was unanimously approved and enthusiastically?
Yes, they will be getting that through the motion form.
Great, thank you. I'm going to adjourn this meeting of the Downtown Design Review and call to order a combined meeting of the Downtown Design Review and the Historic Downtown District Committee. If you could please call a roll for the joint committee, Dro.
Thank you guys for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Greg.
All right, taking a roll for the joint committee. So there will be single motion forms here. This is just practically you are acting as one committee today. So I'm going to go off this list right here. Bialowski.
Present here.
Benton.
Present.
Bogart.
Present.
Boyd.
Present.
Brown.
Present.
Geist.
Present.
Long.
Present.
O'Connell. Parker.
Present.
Pisarcik.
Present.
Schwartzberg.
Present but recused.
Recused. Okay. Soltis.
Present.
Vanderveel is absent. Yablonsky.
Present.
Zarfos.
Present.
And Tom, thank you for making accommodation to be here.
Thank you. And Zarnas. Okay. That's 12 members, which is a quorum.
Very good. Go ahead, Dro.
So similar regulations and procedures for this one. We collected public comments in advance, anticipating a larger volume. Those were collected until Tuesday at midnight and gathered into a memo that both committees should have received, including the Sherwin-Williams team, so that they're aware of the comments. We're following Robert's Rules of Orders like before, taking voice vote, yes or no. Abstentions have been stated already. The chair, acting chair, is Mr. Bialowski and vice chair is Mr. Long. And we are conducting the roll call now. I will introduce the only project here, which is the Sherwin-Williams headquarters, returning for streetscape, landscape, signage, and lighting as they were approved to do so on November 30th in 2021. They have the conditions that they received in their presentation, so you'll be able to pick up from where that left off last time. With that, I will hand it over to the Sherwin-Williams design team to give their presentation. Oh, before that, my director Juan of City Planning, would like to also introduce the project, and then we'll hand it over to Sherwin-Williams.
Let's
Thank
recognize
you, Drew.
Director Hong.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I just want to share on behalf of the administration that we're just really excited overall about this project, about how it's going to activate these former parking lots into this new headquarters, lots of employees. I just also want to thank the Joint Committee for meeting this morning and really putting your heads together. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And we have met twice with the Sherwin-Williams team to give our feedback and provide comments and work together on this and anticipate that there will be more discussion today. But without further ado, would like to turn it over to the Sherwin team. Tim Muckley, I believe, will kick us off.
Thanks, Director Hong. Good morning. My name is Tim Muckley, and I'm the Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Sherwin-Williams Company. We're here today to present our final plans for landscaping, lighting, signage, and street elements. It's very exciting to be speaking in front of you guys today as we're heading into our final phase of design approvals. At the same time, we're just finishing up with our caisson work. Unfortunately, we have to spend a lot of time going down before we can go vertical. But I can assure you that going vertical is just around the corner. Presenting with me today is also Julie Young, our Vice President of Communications, Bill Chilton and Nancy Clayton from Picard Chilton Architects, Matt Heisey with Vocon, Sheila Piccioni, also with Vocon, Andrew Albers with OJB Landscape Architects, Jamie Schwartzberg with Dayru Landscape, and Samantha Bloom with Alvine Engineering. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to turn it right over to the design team.
Thank you, Tim.
Nancy? All right, I must have a lag. I'm still seeing the cover sheet. So thank you. I'm Nancy Clayton from Picard Chilton Architects. I wanted to just recap quickly for you the presentation that we made to you on November 30th last year for the architectural submission. On that date, we presented to you the building architecture. You can see some of the sample imagery on the slide in front of you now. Our information included the overall siting and massing of the project components, the 3 buildings on the 3 blocks. It included the elevations, material samples, some detailing, and 3-dimensional renderings and a physical model showing the project. At that time, we received final approval on those components for the building architecture. And as Tim just mentioned, the construction has already started on site, and fabrication of many of these components, the exterior enclosure and the steel structure, is currently being done off site. So thank you.
Next slide, please. Good morning, this is Matt Heisey from Vocon. As Director Wong mentioned, at our November 30th final design approval meetings, both from the committees and the commission, we did have a number of conditions to respond to. And we have been working with staff and we will continue to work on staff on the resolution of these conditions. But I wanted to just give a quick update on a number of these. So our traffic report has been submitted and has been approved by Commissioner Rob Mavick of the City Commissioner of Streets. That happened about a month and a half ago. So that item has been checked off the list. We will be talking this morning about the north facade and the studying of the north facade and the overall pedestrian experience down Frankfurt Avenue. The inclusion of public art, brand panels, lighting. We will cover that in our presentation. Coordination of the public transit stops and the landscaping plans has occurred. There have been some additional meetings with Jennifer Kipp, the city arborist, Jim McKnight, the city landscape architect, as was requested, and we have coordinated landscaping with the current bus stop locations. Tim will talk in a few minutes about where we are with our overall AVM plan and the coordination with our consultant, our conversations with the city, and some of the measures that we are looking to put in place with the building. This morning we'll be covering, we're obviously here to gain approval on our overall street amenity plan, sidewalks, trash receptacles, etc. And lastly, as I go to the commission conditions, again, in coordination meetings with Jim McKnight, the city arborist, conversations have occurred about the appropriate size of trees, which Andrew Elbers will cover and Jamie will cover in the landscape portion of our presentation. And then lastly, the coordination of the construction of the pavilion. There was a question asked and a condition put on the building approvals at that point in time that the pavilion be designed in a manner that it could accept future retail openings along the Superior Avenue street frontage. And that has been coordinated. Grading has been worked out where simply in the future, some additional sidewalk could be placed and doors be put into the pavilion building for future access from that street frontage. So that's where we are on the conditions. Tim, do you want to circle back on where we are on the AVM plan?
Yes, thank you, Matt. We know there's been numerous public comments submitted regarding the potential to have bird collisions with a building that is largely glass. The need to reduce the potential for bird collisions is clearly a concern to the community, and I can assure you that it's also a concern to Sherwin-Williams and our 3,000 employees. Although our overall AVN strategy has not significantly changed, we have continued to look for design opportunities which will help to mitigate the potential for these bird strikes. As you may recall from our December presentation, our avian plan focused on 3 main objectives, and that was to minimize attracting birds to the campus. That was going to be accomplished by reducing the surrounding food sources, controlling the internal and external lighting, eliminating places for birds to rest and nest and roost. The second was to minimize attracting birds towards the building or the glass. And that was going to be accomplished by limiting interior plants, trees, and greenery near window edges, minimizing accent lighting on artwork, structures, and hardscaping, and the use of fritz, signage, nets, shades, and other visual noise techniques to deter birds away from the building glass. Then lastly, we're going to inspect, document, and adjust. Inspect the grounds on a regular basis for signs of bird interactions, document the date and location of all bird contacts to identify any newly developing hotspots, adjust the plan then to implement additional visual noise techniques where needed. In addition to these operational strategies, we've also continued to look to incorporate design elements into the avian plan. In our review of our building design, our avian consultant specifically identified 2 areas as potential hotspots. Those were the areas around the balcony guardrails and the sky bridges. As a result, we are committed to installing bird-safe glass with a frit pattern at the guardrails along the balconies of both the pavilion and the podium. Likewise, we'll be installing bird-safe glass, will be incorporated into both of the sky bridges. And we'll continue to work with staff on what that frit pattern actually looks like. Another design change that we'll be doing is incorporating the necessary hardware and hooks that will allow us the ability to install bird-safe netting at both sides of the pavilion hub. We consider the pavilion hub the main centerpiece that runs through the pavilion that you can see through from Public Square to West 3rd. Then the third design element is the selection of specific selection of landscape materials which do not attract birds. Jamie from Dayru will talk a little bit more about this during her landscape presentation. But in general, it's about selecting trees, shrubs, and flowers that are not fruit-bearing, seed-bearing, or which attract insects that act as a food source for birds. Then lastly, we've continued to obtain samples of bird-safe frit decals from companies such as Feather Friendly. These decals can be applied to any interior or exterior areas of glass that we identify additional hotspots as we move forward. And of course, we'll also continue to engage with Lights Out Cleveland to both understand and collaborate on best practices for monitoring the building lighting. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the design team.
Hang on for 1 second, Tim, relative to this. I want to ask you what plan there is for accountability in terms of reporting to the city the results of what you determine. If this is accepted and you are monitoring, how does that information make its way back so that it's not just Sherwin-Williams who is responsible for determining whether it has succeeded or not succeeded?
So as I said, we were still developing this plan. We've got the pieces put together, but I assume that would be something that we would work through with the staff.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Next slide. We're going to turn it over to Andrew Elbers and Jamie Schwartzberg to go through our landscape plans.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to represent the landscape. If you go to the next slide, this is just a view from Public Square looking at the pavilion and the pavilion hub, and the kind of what we've been calling the color garden, which would be one of the things that Jamie's going to talk about when we present the plant material. If you go to the next slide, when we met in December, there was, I guess, a lot of the conversation was about the pedestrian experience, in particular the pedestrian experience along with vacated Frankfurt and the connection between the warehouse district and Public Square. And then in general, the pedestrian experience around all the blocks. And so we've taken a close look at that pedestrian experience, how to enhance it, how to make it a more enjoyable, a better pedestrian experience that links all the downtown fabric together. And look for ways to enhance by adding street trees, by adding visual interest, by making generous sidewalks, and connecting everybody throughout the site. One of the things that we wanted to point out is that along vacated Frankfurt, the garage shifted north in our December meeting to allow for a wider sidewalk. We've expanded the sidewalk along there so that you have the full 15-foot sidewalk width with street trees kind of running down the middle on the north side. The other thing that we've looked at here was, because that is a vacated street, the connection to West 3rd, we've worked with planning and changed that connection to be not really a tabletop, but the sidewalk along West 3rd continues at sidewalk level, linking the garage block to the office tower block, so that you don't get a sort of intersection condition. So the pedestrian is preferenced there and is able to cross that threshold and then come around to the sidewalk to the north. Again, the streetscape is continuous around, and
Andrew, just while you're on that subject, if this drawing shows that the sidewalk carries across continuously, which means that this street's one way, correct?
the street is two-way to the garage, and then service vehicles can come to the loading dock at the office tower. But the intent is that vehicles will not be able to travel through to West 3rd.
So those service vehicles don't turn right out of the garage onto West 3rd over that tabletop?
No, there is the possibility that a truck that's too big could be maneuvered through that through over the tabletop and across onto West 3rd if a truck that's too big. But the loading dock is used as the point where a vehicle could make a 3-point or turn in there
and go back
out and then go back out. That's the intended service for the building, is to come in from West 6th, service the building, and then leave via West 6th.
Thank you.
When we talk about materials, one of the things that we'll talk about will be as you can see, the sort of darker bands at either end of vacated Frankfurt or special paving, intended to act as a little bit of a gateway, signaling that that section is sort of different from the rest of the sort of urban fabric, that this is a different street and a gateway to the Sherwin campus. So we'll go through the blocks kind of one by one and look at the conditions, especially Frankfurt, and then we'll also look at the planting plan. So if we go to the next slide, this slide highlights the tree species and the new trees that we're planting around the site and the sort of tree planting scheme. So looking really to create different tree species and groupings to get kind of a larger sense in the compositional sense. So as you walk down Frankfurt, there's a particular species of tree. As you walk down Superior, there's a species of tree. And I guess, Jamie, if you could speak to the species.
Sure. Where we're doing the honey locusts, those are in relation to existing honey locusts that we wanted to keep kind of continuous look there. We've specified a hybrid elm along Superior and West 3rd. And then we're proposing upright ginkgo that kind of pulls all the way through Frankfurt, connecting that to public square, and within the parking lots is a native sour gum, which is not the sweet gum that has the balls. It's actually has no seeds or fruit, but it has very, very good fall color. So, you know, we're thinking about the honey locusts have a sort of, sometimes they have a nice yellow fall color, but it's not great. The ginkgos will have a really good strong yellow fall color, and then you'll get a nice red fall. And then in the front of the pavilion, we've selected some specimen witch hazels that bloom very early. They'll bloom in March. And then tulip poplars to complement those. So kind of thinking about spring, early spring and late fall, when are kind of hardest seasons to have some nice presence from the landscape.
And one of the comments from the meeting in December was a desire to have a substantial tree size along Frankfurt. We presented and that was articulated as having a 6-inch caliper tree. We reviewed that and discussed that with Jim McKnight, and Jim McKnight directed us to recommend a 4-inch caliper tree in lieu of the 6-inch caliper tree, as the 4-inch caliper tree would be able to achieve a 7-foot clear trunk height, so you would be able to walk under it. It would have a robust big canopy and be a substantial tree from day one, but it would also do better in the long run. So it would have sort of less time to less shock in the move and be able to grow in and continue to grow faster and better. So its performance over 5 years would be much better than a 6-inch caliper tree. So we just wanted to bring that up and note that was the direction from Jim McKnight, as that was a condition of the meeting in December.
Thank you, Andrew.
Next slide. And so these are images of the trees that Jamie just presented. If anybody will hold here for just a second so you can see the tree selections. And then the next slide is the garage, what we're calling the garage block. So the block with the garage. So if everybody's had a chance to
advance the slide, please.
Yeah. So along St. Clair and West 6 on this block, we're really working around the existing trees in the existing parking lot screening. And for the most part, this is an existing parking lot condition. So we're supplementing where we can, we're adding planting where we can, but really the bulk of the change is within that parking lot, creating parking lot islands that have room for trees and providing enough soil for those trees to really grow. On the vacated Frankfurt, as we mentioned, what we're doing is at West 6, the pedestrian sidewalk intersection there, using a colored concrete to demarcate a sense of gateway onto Frankfurt. And then as you come along Frankfurt, that north side is a 15-foot sidewalk that will go from the face of the garage to the curb. And then oriented in the center of that will be the series of shade trees at approximately 30 feet on center. They are set in a 6-foot by 6-foot planter well that will be planted. And then alternating with the trees is a light column. So you have a generous sidewalk, you walk around the trees, and then as you move along the garage has a graphic display to add visual interest to that.
What is the dimension of generous?
It's 15.
No. What's the clearance between the tree planter and the building?
Okay. Between the tree planter and the building is 5'6", and then between the tree planter and the curb is 5 foot. So you do have two sections of where you squeeze down to 5 foot around the tree, but then it opens up again to the larger dimension as you move along.
And the reason that the tree is in the middle of the sidewalk as opposed to closer to the curb is?
We had
talked about this before, but just
yeah,
remind us.
there are existing utilities in that area, right underneath the curb. They're fragile, and we wanted to keep the trees away from those utilities in order to keep from damaging them. And so we moved them away so that we're clear of those utilities, but pulled them away from the building enough so that the trees would have enough room to kind of grow and have a nice canopy.
Thank you.
And so as you come down to the right of the page, you go underneath the sky bridge where the inn is located, and then the end of Frankfurt turns, and that curb comes around, and then where you see the darker color, that's the sidewalk that's at the continuous sidewalk level, and you can see the curb cut that heads across West 3rd to the right. So the next slide shows, these are sections that we drew looking at the spacing of trees and the trees in relationship to the sidewalks, but I think it's probably better shown in the next slide, which is a view of looking at the garage. So this is a kind of dusk view. You're coming around the tower, you're looking at the graphic display at the first or the ground floor of the garage, looking at the street trees marching along, and then the alternating light columns that kind of march along in that zone, and the low planting at the base of the tree. And then the next slide is looking down that sidewalk, and you can kind of see that you have the wider zone of the sidewalk, and then as you go around the trees, it is a little bit smaller, like 5 foot wide, and then you see the graphic display on your right.
Those light poles are aimed towards the street, not back towards the building? Or
I believe that they have light on both sides. This may be a factor of the rendering. One of the things that we looked at with the spacing of the light poles and the trees was having the light poles have a relationship to the grid of the building. So the bays of the building, the light poles actually follow along that so that they can help illuminate the graphic display in the evening. And then the trees kind of fall halfway between the light columns. So there's a strong relationship between the architecture, the rhythm of the architecture, and those lights, and then the trees kind of fall in between.
Thank you.
Samantha, do you want to maybe jump in and answer that? I know that you'll cover that under lighting, but I do believe, I think the rendering is maybe slightly off. I think that the lighting is perpendicular to you walking down Frankfurt, so you would see it like in this. I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, Matt, you're absolutely correct. So we have the light poles actually rotated 90 degrees,
Yeah.
and we do have light coming out of two sides of it. So it'll be illuminating in the direction parallel with the way that you were walking. And we have designated lighting mounted to the garage to specifically highlight those storytelling panels on the garage facade.
Thank you.
And so if we go to the next slide, that is the tower block. On the south side of vacated Frankfurt, since we're at Frankfurt, what we've done is we've actually expanded we have the same rhythm of street trees, but we have expanded planting bed, and then the sidewalk there is comes across the face of the building and then continues to West 6th, and that is, excuse me, a narrower sidewalk. Currently, it's 6 feet as you move from one side to the other, with the intent that as you come around, that really wanting to preference people to walk on the north side so that they can interact with the graphic display and enjoy that wider sidewalk, but providing the ability to walk on that sidewalk on the south. Coming around on, let's go West 6th Street. West 6th Street, really what we're doing is continuing with the urban fabric that's there now, so preserving the existing pedestrian street poles, the street lights, and then some of the existing street trees, but then complementing those and adding to them, continuing that urban streetscape down to Superior. Along Superior, working with Jim McKnight, one of the things that we talked about is if we start from the right-hand side here, that's the one of the main entrances to the building. So the building lobby is right there. It's set off with a special paving. So those are concrete unit pavers that come out. There are a series of rated bollards right there that are for security purposes. But as you come around to the left, to the left of where that D is, that portion there is essentially an exhibition space that has will have outward facing displays and graphics that then address the streetscape. So in that zone, we previously had a wall and some planting. We've expanded the sidewalk to allow for the pedestrian to come up to the face of the building and really kind of interact with that graphic display. We've pulled the street trees kind of to the center of the sidewalk again to avoid utilities, but also to give a little bit of room for people who want to interact there. And then there are a series of bollards in between the trees that are there for the wayward car that might run into the building. As you come around to the left side of the tower, where that graphic display and exhibition space in the building stops, you can see that the geometry of Superior changes. As that sidewalk narrows, that's where we really begin with keeping the warehouse district acorn lights marching along. But we've pulled the trees back so the trees sit between the parking lot and that sidewalk, and then allowed for the streetscape to continue to maintain a generous streetscape. Whereas if we tried to continue the streetscape on the right, it just got really too crowded in that area. And so we can go to the next slide, which are some sections in this area. But again, I think that the views show probably what's going on better. So if we go to the next slide. And we didn't really speak to this in the plan, but this is on West 3rd with the tower on your left. The lobby is glass. So you're walking on a 10-foot wide sidewalk right there with the being able to look into the lobby and see the building lobby. And then to your right, we have planting beds that then are sloped up. We do have a low wall that then 18 inches tall that continues along the face of that kind of stops that berm and acts as a security for Sherwin's building. Outbound of that wall to your right, where you see those cars, is a lay-by. That 13-foot width for the lay-by, for the 8-foot for the cars, and 5-foot for an access aisle continues along the width of the length of West 3rd. So on the south side, south of the Sky Bridge, you have the lay-by, you have the 10-foot sidewalk on their left, and as you go north of that Sky Bridge, you have the 10-foot sidewalk on the left. You have the planting beds, and then to the right on the street side, you would have a 13-foot sidewalk. And then the next slide actually takes us over to the opposite side of West 3rd Street. This is looking at the lay-by and sort of outbound of those planting on the Pavilion Block. And if we go to the next slide, this is that condition along Superior where you have the generous sidewalk. It's 9 foot. It's a little over 9 foot on either side of the bollards there, giving you a sort of opportunity to walk up against the face of the building or outbound towards Superior. And then the next slide is the Pavilion Block. And at the Pavilion Block, we talked a little bit on the West 3rd side, incorporating the lay-by, the parallel sidewalks, and then the planting strip and street trees. On the north side, on Frankfurt, we have street trees that are incorporated into the sidewalk zone. Those again are the ginkgo trees, continuing that planting gesture that runs down Frankfurt. On the public square side, on West Road, we're really keeping the streetscape that's kind of there, replacing the trees that need to be replaced, saving the ones that can be saved, but supplementing the planting, but preserving that width of sidewalk through there. And then as the building pulls away, a few things that we've modified since you've last seen this is that on that corner on the upper right of the building is another sort of branding opportunity or display exhibition space for Sherwin. So we've pulled the sidewalk closer to that to give a little bit more opportunities to interact with that, bring you a little bit closer to the building as you walk across that diagonal. The area in front of the main lobby, that's the unit pavers, so a little gathering area there, and then the path continues through that diagonal. The lawn that's in the corner there, have the parallel sidewalks that now connect across, and then we've brought street trees along Superior there to kind of complete the block. The next slide shows some sections of that, and then the next slide shows, if we advance the slide, it shows a view from the corner of West and Frankfurt, looking across the site, and you see the color garden in the background, and then the lawn and the trees, and the pavilion on your right. And then the next slide shows, we've talked about materiality a little bit. Really, the sidewalks for the most part are standard concrete sidewalks, matching much of the sidewalks in the area. We have moments where we have special paving. The dark blue are colored concretes. We're envisioning that being a gray colored concrete with a surface treatment to expose the aggregate. The intent is that colored concrete complements and works with the base course of the building, which is a dark gray stone. And then the unit pavers, or the yellow highlighted areas, those also are, while the picture looks a little beige, again, the intent is a darker gray that works and complements the stone of the building. The next slide shows street furniture. We met with Joyce in planning and reviewed. I think there's litter receptacles. Obviously, we've tried to keep the litter receptacles, both the city and proposed, where they made sense. But we did talk a lot about the proposed bike racks, and where they're located currently. We worked with Joyce and the team to get them in the right position. So we have located some bike racks along Frankfurt, relative close to the loading dock. We feel that these are going to be used mostly by bicycle messengers and couriers coming to Sherwin, entering through the building and the surface area there. So having a kind of a little bicycle parking spot for them. For visitors coming to the lobby of the building, there are bike racks that are located along Superior that are basically in the same place that the accessible parking spots in the parking lot are. And then we've added some bicycle parking over on West Road between the street trees that would allow for somebody coming to visit the hub or the pavilion to be able to park their bikes there and have easy access to the pavilion. In addition, there are bike racks within the garage that will be used by Sherwin employees, and there's a large bicyclist community at Sherwin that will be using those racks. And then, of course, there's the fence around the parking lots.
Is this the extent of the street furniture plan?
This is the extent of the street furniture plan.
So it's notable that there is not a single bench anywhere for anyone to sit down on any of this long expanse of what is supposed to be pedestrian friendly area of downtown. We can come back and talk about that. Let's keep going.
Okay. There is also we've talked a little bit about the site security components. We have rated bollards at the corners of the tower and in front of the the sort of lobby of the pavilion, and then there are sort of non-rated bollards. There's some on the north side of Frankfurt, and then on the south side of the tower on Superior, and then kind of linking together around the perimeter of the lobby and then the pavilion are site security walls, which are basically an 18-inch tall wall that, as we noted, in certain places the landscape is bermed up against it on one side to kind of hide the extent of those walls. And then the next slide, I believe we get into the sort of planting design. And Jamie, you can walk us through the planting.
Thanks, Andrew. This is the overall planting plan, and we'll go through block by block, same as Andrew did. So next slide, Drew. So in the first block, this block, there's really a very nice existing tree canopy. We walked the site with Jennifer Kipp, the city arborist, and we really looked at if we even touch the backs of those curbs at parking, we're going to damage the tree roots to the point where we're going to lose all those trees along there. And so we really kind of talked back and forth with her, but because Sherwin-Williams really hopes that this isn't a parking lot forever, that they would like to develop it in the future. We felt that preserving this existing really lovely tree canopy was kind of the right decision here. We will be, the tree roots are pretty extensive and tight in there, but where we have space, we are planning to repair that fabric of evergreen plants that sort of is only spotty under the tree canopy there. And then you can see the new trees along Frankfurt, and then new tree plantings on West 3rd. And then a little bit of a screening between the existing building that's remaining and the new garage that will act as also a screen, I think, through to the service parking that exists behind there. Next block. Oh, I think you skipped one, girl. No? Okay, you didn't. Keep going. I don't know if the office tower parcel is going to come back, but essentially that is also parking. We did have the opportunity there because we didn't have the existing trees. The parking buffers are quite a bit wider there. We can go back to the overall plan if anybody has questions, but really for Sherwin, the big sort of, is their front of the tower and the pavilion. Those are really the moments where they wanted to focus their landscape efforts. I think they've been very conscious. It might have got dropped out of the proposal, the thing accidentally. And to make sure that what they commit to is something that they feel very confident they can maintain. They really are sort of feel very proud of what they're creating, and they want it to be a real showpiece. So we have worked with them to design what we're calling the color garden, which is in front of the pavilion entrance and faces public square. That is on a sort of ombre theme. It starts from very, very dark, dramatic, almost black planting, fades through purples, pinks, and ends up very light pink and white. And then circling the pavilion is essentially, we're calling a rainbow walk, but it's the sort of array of all the colors. So again, taking off from that very dark color of the door, all the way kind of moving around through the spectrum. And as you get onto West 3rd, those colors are reflected across both sides of the street. So you'll get kind of similar colors on both sides of the street. Anybody who's done any planting design, sort of the combination of selecting plants that don't have seeds or berries or attract insects that birds like, plus salt tolerance, plus urban condition, plus seasonal interest plus working on all of the, you know, north base of the building, south base of the building, and the two pieces along West Third that are right, the base of the tower and the base of the pavilion are getting completely different solar conditions. So we've kind of really worked through this plant palette to think about how we can optimize that as much as possible. So if you go to the next sheet, normally we would present plants to you in alphabetical order, but I think we felt like it was really important to kind of show this is arranged chronologically. So starting in the spring, what we can get the earliest, which I mentioned earlier, is that witch hazel in March, and then going through early spring into summer, and then things that'll come into fall. And all of that is anchored by a matrix you see in the bottom left of evergreen. So a little evergreen arborvitae, and this Pennsylvania sedge, which has a very lovely kind of soft feel that complements the perennials, but is evergreen, so present in the winter as well as the summer. And if you want to go to the next. So this is the rainbow walk. This is the planting all the way around the building. And again, starting very early in the spring and working our colors all the way through. So this is spring and summer. And then next slide is summer into fall. And I think in the fall, you can see there's some hydrangeas and potentilla, some shrubs that are sort of cropping up in the spring and summer highlights, but then we've got some fall highlights, and then again pulling back in evergreens, Great Lakes holly, which is a nice boxwood substitute that's a little more salt tolerant, and then the boxwood where we're sort of far enough away from the street edge that we feel like that's going to survive well. So again, really trying to think about winter interest, evergreens, and also some structure there, but then combining that with kind of keeping that continuous color theme as you move around the site. And next slide, that might be the last slide. Oh, this is the plant list if anybody is curious. And the next slide, more plants. There's a lot of plants. And the next slide. So this is I think this is the final rendering. So I think from here we move on to branding.
Yeah, so that's the conclusion of the landscape presentation.
I want to ask Dro whether it makes sense to keep going through all the rest of this or to deal with the landscaping now. How much more presentation is there? Let me ask you, Matt.
Yeah, Jack, we have site signage and branding to go through, and then we have lighting to go through.
All right, well, let's
I think
finish
I think the brand and lighting will go rather quickly.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Right. Sheila?
So starting off, this is our general site plan that shows everything from your exterior signage to the branding locations. So when developing the site, we really wanted to remain cognizant of what you're able to see at all points. So with high visibility into several of the interior spaces, which is what you see in the blue labeled with the B, that is where we're talking about opportunities to see Sherwin-Williams specific storytelling. So we wanted to ensure that we weren't overwhelming the site, but instead really creating a balance between the interior and exterior storytelling and signage. So what we're going to focus on first, which is highlighted in that pink with the letter F, that is our Frankfurt brand activation, and that's storytelling opportunities. So if you want to go to the next page. So the brand story from a communication standpoint, the headquarters facilities, so your pavilion, the podium, the tower, the garage on the site, are all about how Sherwin-Williams comes together to create and inspire. So specific to the site itself, the brand communication story focuses on that relationship between Sherwin-Williams and Cleveland and how each have impacted each other and how each inspire each other. So in developing the storytelling along Frankfurt, we really wanted to ensure that we were creating a playful and bold sense of color that was inspired by Cleveland. We really wanted to create a point of pride for the community, but also create that connective experience down Frankfurt, of course, connecting Public Square down to the warehouse district. So next slide, going into the concept. So this is where we started thinking about the different Cleveland neighborhoods, and we started thinking about where Sherwin has touched Cleveland and vice versa. So what you're seeing here
is a series of panels that would highlight various Cleveland neighborhoods and key destinations that Sherwin has a connection to. So in this case, you're seeing a snapshot of the inspiration for downtown. So you're seeing several destinations that Sherwin has coded, colored, or developed innovative solutions for, excuse me. So of course we have Rocket Mortgage, the USS Cod, the GE Chandelier, and then the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Then on the next slide, going into a design detail of how this starts to come to life, this looks at just the downtown panel for right now. So the goal of the design is really to capture the colors and personality of each neighborhood by illustrating key points where Sherwin and Cleveland intersect. So whether it's a destination that Sherwin has coded, or the site of their first paint store, or it could even be a part of Sherwin's history, such as Edward Williams' alma mater, which is Case Western. So seeing the composition as a whole, if you go to the next page, you begin to see just the opportunity to create distinct color palettes that really represent each neighborhood, whether it be Ohio City, University Circle, I believe we have Gordon Square in here as well, Tremont, of course downtown, Slavic Village, and really being able to showcase quite literally the color palettes of Cleveland. So right now it has a little bit more of a monochromatic feel because we are at the conceptual phase, but as this grows, this will certainly begin to incorporate more color into this so that we really capture the personalities of those neighborhoods. So moving into the building ID for the tower. So design intent of the building identification has not changed since it was last reviewed by the team in late November, but we are including again to illustrate the sign system and the site system and signage and obtain approval to move forward so that we can go ahead and engage our vendors and begin putting this into the building and start coordinating with the architecture. So the identification sign does remain white during the day, and if you go to the next slide, it does illuminate in the evening. It does remain white so that you have that in the evening. If you go to the next page, you do have roughly a 9-foot height for the S and the W. All of the other characters are an even 7-foot height. That is about 95 feet long at the moment, and it does appear on both sides of the building. So then the next page. So going in, just another recap of the location plan. This is starting to highlight your vehicular directionals and your pedestrian directionals as well as your site ID. So before we dive into the actual location plan and design options, we did want to state that for the site identification and directional signage, we are showing 2 options as we continue to work with Sherwin to really determine their preferred direction, but we do want to present both options for your review and approval today. That said, the options have been vetted and developed with Sherwin staff, so it's just a matter of picking which one we want to go with. So going back to the location plan, again, illustrates the vehicular and pedestrian directionals. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So this particular location diagram is specific to the site identification. It has been placed within the front pavilion garden so that we can utilize the building and the landscaping as a backdrop, as well as align that placement with the building identification sign on the tower that we just saw. So moving into the design pages. So next page. So the site identification and directionals, both vehicular and pedestrian, were developed to create a system that could be flexible, but also balance traditional signage with a hint of distinct Sherwin-Williams branding. So in this particular case, you're seeing the first option for the site ID. We have a very simplified base in that dark gray. Those proportions relate back to their fan deck. During the day, you do have a blue color for Sherwin-Williams. During the evening, if you want to go to the next slide, it does illuminate to white. So you do have that, that color change in the evening and that illumination. Then if you want to go to the next page, you can see how that lays out within the pavilion, kind of tucked back again so that people can also experience it firsthand. You can walk behind it along that sidewalk. So then the next page, you start taking a look at how that starts to play out from a planned view, and you start to see the size. We are working with our vendors at the moment to minimize the footprint of those. So right now, I will say they do have a little bit more depth than we would like, just because we are figuring out just how much space is needed for the internal illumination and making sure that we have proper support within the sign. But we are attempting to minimize that footprint. So then going forward, So as we go through the additional signs, you're going to start to see this nod to the Sherwin-Williams fan decks. It's something that they're very much known for. So we've been utilizing their fan deck to really develop the proportions of the sign, as well as incorporate color and bring an additional level of storytelling to the site. So what you're seeing here is your primary directional on the far left. You're seeing your secondary vehicular directional in the middle, and then on the far right, you are seeing your pedestrian directional. If you want to go to the next page, we're taking a look.
Hang on 1 second, Sheila. Do the colors have any orientation meaning?
That's what we were just about to talk about. So the colors in this particular case, they could be color coded if we would like them to be. But we have talked about the fact that some of the locations do not need directional signage on both sides. So we have talked about the colors being able to change and quite literally mimicking different portions of the fan deck. So we have an opportunity to have them grouped by color. We also have the opportunity to change the color and create multicolor signs at each location. So that is something that we have the opportunity for. One of the things that we talked about is if we have the multicolor, then we have the opportunity on the back side of some of the signs to actually specify what the color is, what the coding is, potentially even incorporate a little bit more information about the innovation behind that color or coding. So then just taking a look again at the design intent for these, so they do range in height. We have the tallest height being around 10.6, the sign itself being around 9 foot. The shortest sign, if you want to go to the next page, is sitting at around a 6 foot height, with the sign itself being around 4'6". I do think we have some flexibility to work with those proportions. And then moving to the next page, you just see the sign system as a whole, taking a look at how that feels in comparison to each other and just in real world application, so you can see the scale. And then the next option, if you want to go here, so this becomes a little bit more literal with the fan deck. So this does take that standard sign, it adds a little bit more flair to it, so to speak. So you see that fanning out of the colors. If you want to go to the next page, again, you have this illuminated in the evening. In this particular case, the colors within the fan deck themselves would become illuminated. So the only portion of this sign that would not be illuminated would be that dark base. So then moving on to the directionals, seeing it on site, of course. And then design intent on the next page. This one we are definitely trying to minimize how deep that fan deck would be and looking at different options for how we fabricate that fan deck so that, again, we can minimize that footprint. But right now you do have a very distinct view of the Sherwin-Williams in front. And from plan view, you can tell you'll have a very distinct view of the fan deck itself and the detail of the fan deck from the back. So then moving to the directionals, this is where the directionals do become a little bit shorter because the colors are now coming out of the side of the signage. So now we have your standard 6 foot and 9 foot sign heights. This is where that fan deck again can incorporate the identification of the colors. They can change colors. They are intended to be monochromatic per sign, but again, per location, they can change color similar to the first option.
Are those illuminated or painted?
The primary the primary vehicular directional would be illuminated so that you can see those words. Those would be on either end of Frankfurt because we do have shipping and receiving. The other locations would not be illuminated.
And the colors are painted, not illuminated also?
Correct. So any internal illumination on the directional signage would all be for the purposes of illuminating the messaging. So this would not be a light source, so to speak. It would really just be to highlight the messaging. Okay, and then if you want to keep going, and then just design intent again. So you're taking a look at, again, those same proportions. You have the same standard width with that 3 foot standard gray panel for the signage, and your standard 4'6", 6 foot, and 9 foot heights for those directional signs. And then taking a look at the system as a whole. And I believe that's it.
Thanks, Sheila. Samantha, lighting?
Hi, everyone. Samantha Bloom from Alvine Engineering here. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So since we originally submitted this design to the city, the design team has further developed the tower exterior lighting. We've designed a prominent crown lighting feature that we believe will both enhance the greater Cleveland skyline and serve as a canvas per se to share the Sherwin-Williams color story. The lighting will have color changing capabilities so that it can be static and timeless as seen in the white in the middle image here, or dynamic and colorful as seen on the far right. The colored lighting is fully customized, so it can be programmed to speak to the owner's brand, celebrate local events and causes, promote awareness for charities, among many other things, as just a few examples. Next slide. Here we can see how this feature wraps the tower crown, so it is visible and it is a dynamic feature from all angles. During the day, lighting will be off and have a very minimal impact on the building's look, while at night it will be on and take precedence as a building feature. Next slide. Today we're also sharing our concept of the building site lighting. We've started here with an overall plan of the existing site conditions, including all of the traffic lighting, pedestrian lighting, poles, overhead lines, signage, and all that good stuff. On the following slides, we'll go ahead and zoom into each of the 3 individual blocks. Next slide. Oh, yep, this one here. On the Pavilion site, there's not a lot of existing infrastructure outside of the street and traffic lighting. So we plan to uphold those existing locations of those lights so as not to disrupt the traffic flow and current illumination levels as designed by Cleveland Public Power for the streets. We are coordinating with CPP to make sure that we will have a consistent street light head for the lights immediately adjacent to the Pavilion building on West 3rd Street and Superior Ave, which are shown in blue here. And then next slide. At the tower site, again, we plan to uphold the existing locations of street and traffic lighting, which are shown in red and maroon. The only exception would be on West 3rd Street, specifically where we anticipate relocating a street light so that it's not immediately adjacent to the sky bridge that connects the tower and pavilion. We are coordinating that move with CPP so that way we can ensure that the street remains properly lit for vehicular traffic. We are treating the pedestrian light poles, shown with the orange dots here on plan, one of 2 ways on the tower site. CPP's poles immediately adjacent to the tower on West 3rd and Superior Avenue will be removed and new pedestrian lighting will be designed for the project. We'll get into that a little bit later. And the pedestrian lighting adjacent to the surface parking lot along Superior and West 6th will remain so that way we can keep that consistent language with the warehouse district. The poles, lights, and power lines that are along Frankfurt Avenue here will all be removed and buried as needed to both maintain CPP functionality while making way for a new design along that street, which we, again, will get into. And then last for the existing lighting on the garage site, again, we're planning to uphold CPP's street lighting design and removing and burying the brown wooden utility poles and associated power lines to keep the site clean and maintain CPP functionality. Frankfurt specifically will be cleared to make way for the project's design concept, and the existing pedestrian poles around the site are intended to remain, again, to speak that same language as the surrounding district. The only exception to that are the 2 pedestrian poles on West 3rd, right in front of the garage, which we plan to remove to accommodate the parking garage entrance and remove obstructions from view to the ground level retail bays. Next slide. All right. For the new lighting that will be designed as a part of this project, as we go through this, on the right side of the slides, you will see images that are intended to indicate the design concept for the specific fixtures that are referenced on plan. So here on the Pavilion site, there are consistent Y5 and Z6 poles on all sides, and at the 2 major sidewalks coming from Public Square leading to the east entrance of the Pavilion. These are what we are referring to as our pedestrian light poles. And they are designed to comfortably illuminate the sidewalk and pedestrian faces to enhance the feeling of security around the site. Supplemental light here will be provided by bollards type BB1, which will be located in the planting areas, and adjustable floodlights type BC1 at that large open green space on the southeast corner of the site, kind of by that branding signage that Sheila just presented. Next slide. On the tower site, again, we're using those Y5 heads and Z6 poles for pedestrian lighting at the sidewalks along Frankfurt, West 3rd, and Superior, where we are adjacent to the building. Where we do not show those Wi-Fi heads is where that existing pedestrian lighting on the site is to remain. We are adding street lighting to Frankfurt Avenue now that it is going to be owned by by Sherwin-Williams. And we are illuminating that with Y3 heads, which will just be like a larger, higher light output version of the pedestrian light poles. So that way we have the same language throughout our site. The surface parking lot specifically will be a different pole head. And then those are intended to provide more of a uniform illumination throughout the wider parking lot areas and maintain light levels that, again, promote feelings of kind of safety and security on the site. And then next slide. On the garage site, we are continuing with the same Y2 heads for the surface parking lot, and the pedestrian lighting on the west, north, and east sides of this block is not shown because, again, we're utilizing those existing fixtures on the site. The north side of Frankfurt is employing a unique lighting strategy to enhance that pedestrian experience along the sidewalk. So as mentioned earlier, we will have luminaires specifically mounted to the garage facade to illuminate the graphic storytelling panels at the first level of the facade. Those are the WF2 fixtures we are calling out. And then the XLC1 luminaires are those light columns that were shown in the landscape renderings. Those are going to be our custom light columns that march consistently down the street, alternating with the trees the landscape team presented. These will have vertical illumination on two sides, indicated by the little arrows on the east and west sides of those luminaires on plan. And these lights will provide pedestrian lighting on the sidewalk, as well as create a fun experience for pedestrians passing through. The lighting within those columns will be fully customizable RGBW lighting, and so that will allow the owner to have the flexibility to create custom dynamic scenes as you move through Frankfurt, or they can integrate it back into the tower crown and notch lighting scenes to create a consistent design along the entire site. That is the conclusion of our package for today. So I'll pass it back over to Tim Luckley.
Where are you, Tim?
Actually, I'll throw this back to Chair Bialowski.
Very good. This is obvious. You guys have done a tremendous amount of work, and this is a lot to absorb. I'm just trying to think the best way to deal with this, and I think we should talk about the public comments that we've received, and then I'd like to approach this in the reverse direction in which it was presented, because I think the longest conversation is going to be about the landscaping, site amenities, etc. And I think that we can deal with the site lighting and the signage packages, relatively more easily. But Dro, what do you think is the best way to discuss what public comments we have received? Because there's been quite a bit.
Sure. I could try to paraphrase. I think we provided a memo of all the comments to the committees and the group, so I think you're all aware of it. And if it's helpful, I could paraphrase them in their main categories and try to capture the essence of most of them. So there was a good number of comments from various people across the region about bird friendliness features of the glass on the first floor. Specifically concern, about how the site will work when birds are at their peak migration.
Have these people had a chance to see the avian plan in its present form? Did they comment on that, or is this just a continuation of the previous concerns?
This is, I would say, a continuation of previous concerns.
Very good. Okay. Next category.
There's some miscellaneous comments just about urban design in general. One that mentioned that, surface parking lots are not an ideal use, and that a lot of employees would be using public transportation, so maybe the parking lots could be utilized in a different way. Also about landscaping that does a better job of hiding the existing surface parking lots. And then finally, the last category is about the street amenities and the streetscape. noting that there are no benches in the plaza or along the site, and that if we wanted a living city, we need a place where people could sit and have coffee and do things like that. Similarly, there was a comment from a member of Clevelanders for Public Transit that this is a very busy transit hub over on Superior, and that there's concerns about there not being seating or any other improvements for riders or a plan for riders.
Very
And
good.
I'm hoping that did a good enough job of encapsulating that memo
I think
that
you
everyone
did.
received.
I think you did, and I think that I don't want to give short shrift to any of those comments. Those memos are available. We did read them in advance. There have been some conversations. Let us bear those comments in mind as we go back through these various pieces and make sure that we address them. So let's start with the lighting, and I will open it up to the panel of both committees, the panel at large, for comments on the lighting. And we could do this block by block, or we could do it overall. There's a pretty consistent system that has been defined here. Maybe let's start with the overall tower lighting, if we could go back to that. Does anybody have any concerns about that or comments about it? I'm not hearing any.
This is Jeff Bogart.
Go ahead.
So Drew, can you go to the other slide that shows at night, the illuminated RGB lighting? You have a beautiful column of lighting, but it doesn't quite reach the top. What is the sense there of what's going on at the very top of that right-hand rendering? Why do the dots of red light or the squares of red light just stop at some point? Is that just to be at the underside of the Sherwin-Williams sign, or is there an architectural reason they stop at that point?
This is Nancy. Are you able to hear me? I could answer that.
Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, there's a gap in the building there where the building has that recess where the vertical color changing lights are, and the tower crown. I don't know if you might recall at the meeting, I think in last summer and in November, we described that we were breaking up the overall width of the building by breaking it into two narrower portions to have a taller, slimmer aspect ratio. And so the tower crown, there's actually a gap there.
So this is actually causing those to read as two separate towers as opposed to a single block.
Right. So there
So it stops at the recess in the building, and that's a good reason to stop it. Thank you.
Any other comments on this portion of the lighting? I think this is actually pretty dynamic myself. And it could be very cool. Let's go to the site lighting. Are there any concerns about any aspects of these plans for the lighting? They seem to have been well coordinated with existing conditions. It's all modern. Was there any discussion about whether this light is going up in the air, dark sky issues? What can anybody address that?
Yeah, I can speak to that real briefly. We are not specifying any luminaires on the site, with the exception of those dynamic light columns on Frankfurt. We're not specifying anything that has an uplight component to it, so all of the light will be directed down.
Very good. Okay. Does anyone on the panel want to say anything else about the site, about this lighting? Because I think we're going to attack this in separate motions relative to the separate pieces. Are there any concerns about this lighting?
I have a question about the lighting at the garage.
Go ahead, Melanie.
There's lighting all around the garage, but not at the entry facade. I didn't see any. Is that West 3rd?
No, entry into the garage is actually from Frankfurt, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
But there is street lighting along West Third. It's existing street lighting.
Okay.
So I would entertain a motion to approve this lighting package as submitted. If
This is
someone
Jeff
wants to
Bogart. I'll make such motion to approve the lighting package as submitted.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, is it possible to maybe just take notes on the separate sections and at the end we recap and pass one single motion?
No, I don't believe it will be.
I'll second the motion, Tommy Blonsky.
Is there any further questions or comments?
Chairman Bialowski, I don't have a comment on the plan specific, but I wanted to relay a conversations that Joe and I have had internally as staff on the coordination of selection of lighting type, because you have 55 Public Square that you guys just approved, their lighting plan. You have the lighting at Public Square, which is not so new, and the desire that maybe the committee wants to comment on that the selection of lighting styles are the same from an aesthetic standpoint, that not from how the space is lit, but from the selection of fixtures.
Are you
Trying to
talking
create
about
some
the
cohesion.
color of the light or the appearance of the fixture itself?
The appearance of the fixture itself, so that we have some cohesion as we move through the city from project to project.
I'm not exactly sure how to address that, Tom, right now, because if we've approved the other, we're going to force Sherwin-Williams to do what 55 Public did?
Or if it's not too late to have a conversation with 55 Public Square. I don't know. I just feel like that we should be cognizant of not just the specific project we're talking about, but the projects adjacent to it as we have a cohesive lighting fixture as we go through the city.
This is Jeff Bogart. I think that these people for Sherwin-Williams have done a magnificent job on selecting light fixtures. I think Dro, you and staff and the rest of planning, if you can work with 55 Public Square and get them to change their fixture style to match these or do something similar, I think that would be great. But I wouldn't want to do it the other way around.
And Tom, if you look at this, you look at these A light fixtures, these are existing, remaining in place. I don't think that 55 Public is changing their street lighting. Now, they may have different pedestrian lighting, but I don't think these need to match in that regard.
And I would also agree with that comment, Jack.
Does anyone want to voice a different opinion? Hearing none, I'm going to keep this moving along. We have a motion and a second to approve the lighting package as submitted. Are any other comments? And if not, Dro, I would ask you to call the roll.
Yeah, could I confirm again who was the first and second?
Jeff Bogart was the first motion.
Okay.
Tom Yablonsky seconded.
Okay. And just to be clear, we're splitting this up in the motions, but I think it's going to have to be run by the commissions on exactly how they're going to interpret split
They
motions.
can decide to do whatever they need
Yeah.
to do, but it's not clear to me that everything is going to pass today. So I want to get as much of this through as we can.
Okay. First Bogart, second Yablonsky, approve as presented for lighting. Ready for roll?
Yes.
Bialowski,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Bogart,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Geist,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Pisarcik,
Yes.
and Yablonsky.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Joe-
I'm sorry.
We got
I'm looking-
Zarfos
It's
still.
a very long list. Sorry, Greg Soltis,
Yes.
Yablonsky,
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
Okay.
The motion carries. Thank you. Let's go on to signage. And I would open up Well, a question, first of all, I think for Sheila, are you seeking to have both option one and option two approved, or are you seeking guidance from this combined panel as to which one we prefer? You know, why are we seeing both of these?
We'd like to have both approved, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but we are debating between which option we would like to move forward with, and we're working with Sherwin staff to determine that. So in order to move the process along, we did want to obtain approval for both options if we could.
I understand.
Jack, and if we were able to do that, excuse me, I'm sorry, if we were able to get approval on both options, we would then come back, obviously work with staff on which of the two options was the desired option to move forward.
Okay. Well, I think we can give you our comments on them for whatever it's worth, and you can take those into consideration. Could we see the, Dro, if you could show us the two basic concepts and toggle between them for a moment. So one is basically the simpler, and the other is the fanned color, correct?
So one you have very much as rectilinear, and the other very much plays on the fan deck in a literal sense with the angles.
And the size of these in general is different for what reason?
Just the amount of messaging. One of the things we wanted to remain cognizant of is there were only a few areas on the site that we needed the larger signs because we have more messaging. And there are a couple areas that, because of the minimal amount of messaging, we didn't want to utilize a sign that was quite that big for something that just needs to signify an entry to a parking lot or a do not enter location or a basic directional.
But Sheila, it seems to me
primary, I'm sorry, Jack, there's primary vehicular signage.
Right.
Those are the two large ones. Those are like at the corner of West 6th Street.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but between the two options, isn't there a size variation as well?
You had stated there was a height difference between the two.
Correct, or excuse me, correct. There is a height difference because of the color detail. So all of the gray panels in both options are all of the same sizes. That does not change, but the detail of the color is what is changing the height.
I see. So the gray
first-
panels are all uniform in both, and
Exactly.
it's only okay.
So this is Jeff Bogart. I have a couple of comments. I like what you've done on both options. However, I like option two better because I believe that it is more dynamic. I think that the general public would relate better to that design and relate it to a fan deck rather than option one. As to option two, if Drew, if you can change the slide to option two. My comment on option two is that I think that because we live in Cleveland in the wintertime half the year, you should raise these up on a base because the bottom Sherwin-Williams on all of these is going to get lost in the wintertime with snow. And then you're going to have an issue of ice and rock salt, calcium chloride, whatever chemicals they're using. So I'd really like to see option two used, but raised up on some type of a pedestal base of some sort. And I think this relates much better to the general public.
Other comments from others?
I have a comment, Jack. I like the fan deck approach, but I'd like to see if it wouldn't be possible with, given the digital technology and the utilization of LEDs, that those colors could change. You know, maybe we talked about at one point color of the month or something like that, rather than having them just be painted on and where over time, you know, they might fade. So that's my comment.
I wanted to just add that I agree with that because I feel like every year, you know, designers and even the general public to some degree looks for whatever the color of the year is and then the color palettes that go along with it. But it isn't really expressed anywhere on the outside of the building that can be celebrated or the public can interact with.
Thank you, Greg. Other comments?
This is Mark Benton. I agree with the comment about the fan deck as it runs down to grade. Certainly the main sign that is in the grass area, I think that would get beat up immediately. And I think it's frankly a little bit over literal. So I would opt for the other option.
My personal opinion is the same as Mark's. I think that simpler is better here. Also talking about adding an awful lot of money if these are going to be, if those colors are going to be illuminated rather than painted for all of the signs that are appearing on this campus as well. But I think that this is something that we can, all of us have our own opinions relative to this, that this is something that we could leave to the owner to determine with their designers which is their best option. They've asked us to approve both. I think the one substantive comment that might want to be a condition is that there be a base that lifts this up just a bit so that these signs are going to last and not rust out. I would entertain such a motion if someone wants to make it.
This is Jeff Bogart. I'll make the motion that we approve both option 1 and option 2 signs with the recommendation that for option 2, the applicant review a short base underneath these signs and that they look for both option 1 and 2 at their discretion, whether they can make these color changing RGB colors for their fan deck color sheets.
Jeff, I would ask you to include option 1 with the base as well in your motion.
I'll include that for option 1. I thought they had those up higher, but I'll include that for option 1 as well.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Melanie. Is there any further question or comment?
Jack, this is Rick Parker.
Go ahead, Rick.
Quick comment regarding the base. We did in the warehouse district on the anthology signs, if they want to see an example, we added the base on those as well, and it works out fine.
Thank you, Rick. Could you, Dro, take this to the monument sign in front of the pavilion with the fan? Because I want to express another concern, which is that, the security issue of what can be hidden behind that sign. The other sign, which is simpler, you can see all the way through. There are going to be people climbing on this, no doubt. And that's, for whatever it's worth, it's just a comment. With no further comments, I would ask you to call the roll on Jeff Bogart's motion. You there, Dro?
Yes. Just
Do you
finalizing.
have the first and the second as well? Who was the second?
I was.
It was Melanie. Thank you.
Bogart first, Boyd second, and the motion is to approve option 1 and 2, but add a short base underneath to keep it off the ground and safe.
There were other recommendations as well.
As well as consider RGB illuminated colors instead of a static paint.
Thank you.
Bialowski,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Bogart,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Geist,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
A good chunk of them, especially overnight. Take care of
Parker,
someone. There's a reason why you get
Yes.
Pisarcik,
Yes.
Anyway,
Soltis,
this is very
Yablonsky,
very helpful.
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
We're picking up some extraneous comment. If you can mute, if you have background conversation, please.
Okay, that signage motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. Let's go to the landscape and amenities. And I think and if we're doing this in reverse order, tell us why there's no benches on this site. And can you, Joe, if you could take us to an image that will help us.
A tip.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Tim, did you want to address that?
Yeah, do it. Let me address that, Chair Bylowski. So, we spent a lot of time really figuring out how to enhance the pedestrian experience. If you go back to our schematic design approvals, and, the big focus was how do we move people from Public Square to the warehouse district along Superior Avenue? We've added storytelling panels along Frankfurt. We've added specialty lighting along Frankfurt for the pedestrians. We've created outward-facing display windows along the front side of the pavilion. We've done the same thing along the tower at Superior. We've increased these sidewalk widths, and I really think that we've added incredible landscaping. And so, our goal was to really enhance that pedestrian experience for the people who are traveling between the site. Across the street, there's 10 acres that make up Public Square that was specifically designed for residents and visitors to relax, congregate, enjoy the outdoor amenities. So, the installation of park benches, it adds an element that might actually compete with the experience that was intended at Public Square. And, I know there's maybe two different sides of this. There's one about the, the bus stops, which to me is a little bit of a different issue. But as far as, our site outdoor amenities, we were really focused on how do we enhance that experience. I think when you look at the site plan, we've done a lot to really make it a great experience traveling through. It was never really designed to be a place of congregation.
Tim, I appreciate all that you have done, but I think that there are some larger issues that maybe you're not addressing. One is concern about vagrants, which I'm sure is on your mind. I do think that the bus stop issue is clearly something that has to be addressed. But I think that in spite of all of the great things that you've done, that you really should be providing some opportunity for people. It's a big site. It's a long site. What's the smoking policy at Sherwin-Williams?
We don't allow smoking in the building. And
So what do people do? They're going to stand in the garage area or next to the service, so that they're undercover and be hanging out outside the building?
Well, obviously, we really encourage them not to smoke at all. But
Of
to
course.
the extent that they're going to do that, as long as they move away from the entry doors, within, with existing law, there's not a whole lot we can do out on the public streets. So we don't really have a plan of how to deal with that at this point.
Well, I think that you should have some plan for that. I really don't think that it is an adequate response to not provide any benches on 3 major city blocks in downtown, especially where there is some public transportation. And, you do have some walls out in front where that color garden is. To expect that people are not going to dwell there even for a moment or two, I don't think is a reasonable place to be.
Are you thinking, within the sidewalk area? I guess what I'm trying to get to where are you thinking would be appropriate for benches?
Well, I think certainly some accommodation relative to the bus stops, to public transportation, that there should be some consideration relative to that. I think that you should be thinking about where people are going to come outside your building to be able to smoke or to stand, and that there should be appropriate receptacles there for them and a place for them to sit. And I think that in the very public front area of your garden, that there should be at least some accommodation for somebody who might, be infirm to sit down and enjoy this incredible color garden that you have provided.
I agree. I totally agree with that. I think there should be some benches, especially by the pavilion along Public Square, facing that area at the very least, and probably other places too.
So let me, if we were to consider that, would we be able to work with staff to figure out what would be the appropriate place to put benches that would meet our security requirements and would be appropriate for the site?
I would think so. It may be that we want this amenity piece to come back to committee. Frankly, because just being fully transparent, I think that it will be easier for us to say no to you than it will be for them. And to this is, Tim, this has been, I think, a really good process of keeping Sherwin-Williams moving along, able to get under construction, to build the building that you want to build. I think that we have listened to your concerns, and that together we have figured out ways to improve the project and let it proceed. This is really a place where the rubber meets the road in terms of what the pedestrian experience is, and so I feel like this group is sort of like the last guardian relative to those kinds of issues. And we're not going to ask you to do things that are unreasonable, that you cannot maintain, or that are going to prevent security or other types of issues for you. But I think this is something that we would want to see again, and I don't think that it will hold you up.
Jack, would it be fair to ask that that requirement extends to the point that we can control the conversation, specifically on the pavilion site? And where I'm going with this is what you're asking for requires us and Sherwin-Williams to have some deep coordination conversations with the RTA. And that is not exactly within our control. That conversation, while Tim, I mean, you can speak for yourself, but Sherwin-Williams has been open to having that conversation. It is not something that we can exactly control.
This is Director Huang. I can just share too, but for the record, just for the record, we are very, very open to working closely with the team to make sure that, we can get a site plan that is good for our civic realm. I did want to raise that this is a point that has come up. And so I'm committed to working with the Sherwin team to make sure that we can get some specific, additions that will make sense for them in the site plan. I do want to share though that, we have discussed anticipating user needs, and really, like, without those types of railings and benches, you are going to have people in the lawn or leaning against the building or against the trees. And so it is something that we are very interested in working on. And I'm also very interested in coordinating the discussion with RTA, and I believe Sherwin is as well. So
this is Jeff Bogart. I agree with Jack Bialowski's comments and yours, Director. I think it's important that this does come back before this committee. And to the people from Sherwin-Williams, we've been very good at working with all the other major projects that have come through, working hand in hand. We understand there's a lot of issues back and forth, and we've always been able to work things out with them to an amenable agreement at the end of the day. So I would encourage you to work with us and let's get this done for the final piece of this.
Matt, I would think that with Director Hong's comments here, that should give you confidence that this will be able to be resolved. And frankly, if RTA doesn't come to the table, then the city and this committee will work with you without them to do what we think is in the public's best interest.
Jack, can I ask, add on a personal level, as someone that has a spinal stenosis, I cannot stand for more than 4 to 5 minutes. And if I'm meeting with an employee in the front pavilion, that's going to really lit how long I can visit. So, I mean, I wouldn't really be able to utilize it without a bench, personally.
Let us, what I would like to do is to actually take a motion to table the furniture and amenity program here, which means that it will be resolved, it will come back very soon, and we will be able to look at it that way. You have any objection to that, Matt?
Before we do,
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of, I understand some of our focus here, but I did want to inquire about the fence that's shown here. I think your notes on the screen show it to be 48 inches tall. That seems a little tall to me. And so one question, I'm curious how tall the existing fence is around some of those lots that are there today, just for a comparison point. But then also, I would like to maybe explore a different style of fence. I feel this one is very severe, very institutional, and not very friendly. I'm wondering if the applicant is open to a different style of fencing.
Well, can we, first of all, let's address this, Krista, this would have come up under after the motion to table in additional questions and comments, but since it has come up now, let's address it now. How high are the existing fences? And are any of those remaining, or are they all new? Where is Mr. Albers? Andrew.
I should be here. Jamie, I think what we've intended to do is
4 feet.
Excuse me, sorry.
Existing is 4 feet.
Jack, I'll volunteer that on West 9th Street, there are fences around parking lots that are anywhere from 3 feet tall to 6 feet tall.
Krista, what's your reason for thinking that 4 feet's too tall when, we have this all over the place now?
I was just merely asking so that I understood what was there now. That
Okay.
if it's similar, then that's fine.
I mean, I think the purpose of this fence is to keep pedestrians from walking across landscape to control the entries in and out, and it's minimal so that it tries to disappear. I think that's what the intention is.
There also appears to be a lot of landscaping around some of these fence areas. Is that correct?
The fence area has the evergreen screen that is, I believe, 4 feet deep behind it. So the fence is outbound. The intent of the fence is that it is the style of the fence, which is admittedly hard to see here. The vertical bars, the vertical elements are a flat bar that is about 1 inch deep, and then the horizontal are sort of 1/8 inch dowel metals. The intent is to have that in sort of a dark bronze color, so that it would kind of disappear into the evergreen hedge. And then the 4 feet is really working with code. And again, the intent is just to stop people from, or to deter people from kind of just willy-nilly walking from sidewalk to parking lot. We actually talked to Jim McKnight about that and added a section along Frankfurt to help further control the movement of people. I don't see any issue with reducing the height if the committee sees that as a thing to do, a benefit. And we could also revisit the style of it, but the style is a manufactured product that we've used before, and it does kind of work with evergreen hedge in the background.
Andrew, just to be clear, when you say code require, I mean, we're talking, there's a zoning requirement for screening of streetscape, for screening of parking. And part of that zoning requirement is the fence in addition to the plantings that are beyond it. So we would just need to check and make sure that we understand what is the minimum height of that zoning requirement for the fence.
I'm not as concerned about the height of the fence as I am about the style of the fence. I think that's going to make a much bigger impact. And I think if you walk around the warehouse district, you're going to find that most of the fencing is a more ornamental style with 2-foot square brick piers that are 6, 7 feet high, something of that nature. I think if you went towards that style, you should review it and go towards that style. It would be a better tie-in to the rest of the area.
Is that opinion shared universally throughout this panel? Because I'm not sure I agree.
I think a lot depends upon how long those surface parking lots are going to remain there. If the intent is to develop those shortly after the completion of the Sherwin-Williams structures, then I wouldn't see the need to invest heavily in the appearance.
I don't think anybody knows that.
I think we're all aware that sometimes in Cleveland, development can take a very long time. You know, this site at the square here that Sherwin-Williams designed for the pavilion, that was last designed by Cohn Peterson Fox back in what, the mid 1980s? And we've waited all this time for development. I'd really like to see them put in a nice fence. Look, if they develop this in 2 years to something else, that's great. But in the meantime, one never knows how long it's going to take.
This is Rick Parker again, in the warehouse district for as many years as I've been here. We have very few, just the detail point, just so that people don't go off sidetracked here. We have very few, if any, brick piers anywhere. And the fencing that is installed is pretty much, nothing is custom. Most of it is off the shelf and probably the least expensive version that meets the requirements from design review. So I'm personally am open to looking at alternatives. I mean, this is a contemporary modern building. The other ones were probably trying to align with more of the historic fabric of buildings adjacent, those kinds of things. So just a couple of details there. Thanks.
This is Tom Zarfas. I think we're getting down into some details here. I have some broader issues with this that just go beyond what style fence we use. But I don't know how you want to address that, but.
Are they relating to the amenities?
They are.
Okay, then let's hear them now.
Well, it's basically, I didn't think I was going to make this meeting, so I did send out a memo that covered my views. And well, I think there's a lot of really good things in this project. We expressed concern early on about this pedestrian experience, and that applies to all the edges. You know, I spent 15 years in the Hoyt block just down the street looking at warehouse district parking lots, and a good bit of the warehouse district is nothing but parking lots. They weren't very well, they didn't have much in the way of amenities, and that's an understatement. And I was hoping that Sherwin-Williams would do better than the city minimum, you know, the few feet of grass, shrubs, and a faux wrought iron fence, which is what they did most of the places in the warehouse district. And honestly, I can't imagine Cincinnati or Columbus, much less New York or Chicago, accepting this kind of a solution to surface parking in the core of the city, 1 block from our signature public space. I mean, this just isn't good enough. And I guess rhetorically, I'd ask, you know, why does every future development in this town have to be an edge-to-edge surface parking lot? And why do we build a big parking garage and surround it with surface parking? I mean, these things just don't really make sense to me.
Tom, that is not relating to that's the conversation we're going to have about the landscape. We're trying to talk about the amenities.
Well, it has a lot to do with amenities because amenities are on the edges, or should be on the edges of this parking, but fine, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Hey, Jack, this is Tom Yablonsky. I have a comment just to add. I would hope that we would eventually get seating in some of these gathering spaces, and I would just make the comment that if we design it like seating walls and some really cool options, they have the opportunity for Sherwin-Williams to show off their skill, their color, their product. So I'd view it as a positive if they come back with some seating options. They'll let them explore creativity.
All right, we're gonna table the furniture and amenity plan, and they've heard our conversation. They know what our concerns are. and we'll come back and have a separate conversation about it. It's just too much information to deal with in a single meeting. So I would like to entertain a motion to table the.
I will make
This
that
is Jeff
motion.
Bogart. I'll make that motion to table this
I think
draft.
we just heard it from Tom Geist and Jeff. Will you be a second?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further concern or discussion before we take a roll call to vote to table the amenity and street furniture plan?
Director Hong, I'm sorry to raise this, and this possibly could go into the next section, but just in terms of
who's speaking right now?
This is Director Huang.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Joyce.
I'm just doesn't fit cleanly into any category, but wanted to raise that there had been some staff discussion regarding just the circulation around Frankfurt and making it clear beyond signage that there is no access off of West 3rd onto Frankfurt, and using things like paint on the ground to demarcate that there is a bike entrance or a bike facility. I just want to raise that as something for further exploration again with the staff.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I do know that in this next portion of the conversation, I actually want to start with a discussion about what's happening at Frankfurt and how the sidewalk is working. So let's call the roll for tabling the streetscape furniture plan.
Bialowski,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Bogart,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Geist,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Pisarcik,
Yes.
Soltis,
Yes.
Yablonsky,
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
Okay. So that's tabled. Let's go on to the landscape. If you could bring the landscape plan up, please. Okay. I'd like to start with Mr. Zarfos relative to, well, actually, let's talk about Frankfurt for a minute and then get to the overall landscaping plan. Director Hong has raised the issue about what's happening with the elevated sidewalk. You're going too fast for us, Dro. You were fine back there.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the renders of Frankfurt.
We don't,
You're
just
all
the
good.
site plan is what we want.
Yeah, that's while Dro is moving to that slide, I just want to share that the staff is very appreciative. We had an extended conversation with Sherwin about this. Originally, there was, going to be a gate there. I believe the infrastructure for that is still going in, but the Sherwin team has really moved forward with this tabletop treatment and continuous sidewalk at Frankfurt. So we're really pleased with that because it benefits pedestrian safety, and it's it's much more aesthetically pleasing and more welcoming than perhaps a gate. We do think that for eastbound motorists on Frankfurt, we want to make sure that they're exiting through the West 6th Street exit. And also that motorists coming from West 3rd Street are not trying to access Frankfurt. And so we know that there's utilities along Frankfurt, along the north side of Frankfurt. And so it's not possible to, do any more infrastructure. However, I think that some narrowing of Frankfurt using paint could just assist with making sure that bicycle and pedestrian safety is elevated, and that it's just clear that this is meant to be a narrower street. It's pretty wide right now. I don't think it needs to be specifically on the eastern edge, need to be the width of 2 lanes. It definitely does need to be on West 6th because it's two-way. But
Joyce, why does there need to be any street past the service entrance to the garage? Why isn't that all just out to the right of that, all just sidewalk?
I
Elevated
believe,
sidewalk.
right, I believe there's utilities, and Sherwin, feel free to, Tim, feel free to jump in. There's also a service truck, larger service truck that will be parked on the south side of Frankfurt once a day to access service on
Yes,
for the
but
tower.
it could park, I could park on that section of sidewalk. I mean, there's, that portion could be VUNERF, right? You know, it's, what's going to happen is that people are going to come down here, they're going to drive past the entrance to the garage because the roadway is continuing, and get down there, and they won't be able to get out. Why don't we make a way that, you know, they have no need to go there, that it is primarily a pedestrian place, but that a truck can be on it? The fact that there are utilities under it doesn't mean that there couldn't be more concrete above it. I mean, if
I
you're
defer to
driving
the
on it,
Sherwin, I defer to the Sherwin team on that. I also think that an infrastructure light with good paint, we've also seen good examples of that other places, can also help if infrastructure is not possible.
This
Yeah,
is
Chair
I've
Bielanski,
spent over 21 years in this area. My office at West 9th and Superior. When it comes to the bicyclists and the electric scooters, they will go anywhere and everywhere they want to go, including diagonally across major intersections, up the wrong side of the street, between rows of cars. They'll do anything. But I do agree with Jack that as people and cars come down Frankfurt to the east, they're going to want to continue across there. And I think that this should stop, and there should be some type of a barrier or a physical change there to prevent them from going any further. I see no reason to have that area as pavement.
if you look at, if you think about Ludlow Alley in Columbus, which is at the Nationwide Arena, this is primarily a pedestrian area. But the way that it is paved allows for a lot of truck service to be on that at other times of day. I think that if you were to not treat that as a road at that point, primarily in pedestrian as secondary, but to do the reverse, that would solve a bunch of these problems.
So Chair Bielanski, let me speak to that just a little bit. So we've designed, because of the tightness of where Frankfurt is right now, we believe we'll be able to get all of our deliveries in and out of the loading dock and back out onto West 6th Street, except for major semi trucks. So basically a 53-foot trailer cannot back into the loading dock and get back out onto West 6th Street. So the plan was with the larger semi trucks and deliveries, they would come down, vacated Frankfurt. They would, park along the south side. They would be unloaded from, with a forklift, and then there's a ramp to get back up into the tower. From there, the semi truck would have to swing, left of center, on Frankfurt and go over the tabletop and to get out onto West 3rd. That's our best solution for how to really manage. I mean, we're going to try to encourage all of our truck deliveries.
I don't think it's a problem, Tim, for them to do that. I'm just suggesting that tabletop be extended all the way back to the garage.
So the secondary reason why we may, I would like to maybe think about that is the other option would be, so right now we have everybody in the entire garage only coming in one direction, and that's coming in through Frankfurt. And then at the end of the day, everybody will leave out on the West 3rd. If I need to reverse the flow of that, if there's an accident or something's blocked off on West 3rd or on Frankfurt, whichever, I may need to switch the operations of that and actually bring people in the opposite direction.
I don't think Jack is saying that
that's not a problem.
People from going down there. I think what he's saying is to make it a little bit more unobtrusive and have people denote that they really shouldn't be going across that tabletop because it's much wider and it looks more pedestrian than it does vehicular. But you should design it and build it as if trucks are going to go across it.
Or cars if you need to. I'm just saying that right now, that it should be able to accommodate both vehicles and pedestrians, but it ought to look like a pedestrian environment, not a vehicular environment. And I think that's easy to accomplish.
Jack, are you suggesting that goes back to the entrance to the loading dock?
Yes, I think that would be wise. And I think the way that you pave that will indicate to people that although I can drive on it, I got to go slow, and pedestrians will be more comfortable to come through. And I'm not suggesting that you put any street furniture in the middle of that, anything that would obstruct vehicles from being able to. I don't think you need to change what you've done relative to how the trees or any of that works. I'm just saying pull the table all the way back to the service dock entrance, and that will signal to people who are coming in that they are not supposed to go any further that way, unless when Tim needs to reverse the direction of flow, he's going to be able to do that. He can do that with cones. He can do that. You know, he probably will have signs. He might even have personnel down there directing people when he has to do that.
So I think we'd be willing to take a look at that. We just have to see how that would work with the rest of our operations.
Okay, well, I think
continue
that's
to
what
work
we're asking.
with staff and look at that.
You could even look at a couple of bollards, but leave a wide section out for cars and trucks to go through. At least it's a visual cue that people should not be going across that.
Let's now, Tom Zarfos, could you please talk to us about what you were trying to talk to us about before and address the issues that you had laid out relative to the overall landscaping?
Yeah, my main issue is that the setbacks on these parking lots just are inadequate. It's the same old tired stuff that's been in the warehouse district for the last 50 years. As I said, I spent 15 years in the Hoyt block looking at this stuff and walking around it. We can do better. I don't know why we need all this parking. I don't know why, as I said, we treat every future development site as an edge-to-edge surface parking lot. And I don't know why we build a garage and then surround it with more surface parking. These edges should just be more generous, more interesting, more welcoming. They'd be ideal places where people could have a place to sit and not be a security threat to the Sherwin Williams.
What is the, we have 5 feet, right?
About, yeah.
Well, isn't that enough room for planting, and it's enough room to set a bench if you wanted to set a bench?
Well, Jack, walk around the warehouse district now, and that's what they have, and it's not a very interesting place. I just don't understand why we can't give it more room. I think the fence could be a much more interesting amenity than this off-the-shelf. It's probably better than what some of the things they use down there, but I just think we're missing some opportunities. And as I said, I don't think other cities, one block away from their most important public space would accept that level of amenity and development.
Rick Parker, I'd like to hear from you.
Wow, okay. Well, yeah, we can definitely do better. I think in the past it's been, what will meet the requirements for design review in the city, and with no creativity. Now, I'm not sure I totally agree with Tom. I've been here just as long, and there are some easy opportunities if you want a specific. I mean, the corners of these parking lots could be carved out where you don't park a car and it's dead space.
That's a very good point.
Those could come inboard to move the fence in. Now you've created a little space that could be seating or landscape or what have you. And maybe you lose one space where you have those angled parking up there. But
you don't actually need to, right?
And you've got it at the end of Franklin, and there's one there now. Why can't that, and you got one on Superior, it looks like. Why can't that continue up West 6? I mean, there's some real simple, obvious things that could be done. maybe we allow a variation for that 5-foot landscape buffer to, you go in there, put some stones down and put a couple of seats in there. Why does it have to be straight across?
How would you guys feel about that at the corner of Superior and West 6th and Frankfurt and West 6th and St. Clair and West 6th, to actually let the fence follow the duck in, where to put more of that green space on the outside and maybe let something more interesting happen there? Is that something you would be open to?
From a, I'll let Tim speak to that, but I just wanted to note that the note about the 5-foot buffer and sort of code minimum is really germane to the garage block. On the tower block between Superior and the parking lot, the buffer is 8 feet wide between the parking and the sidewalk. On this West 6th Street side on Tower Block, there's actually 15 feet between the sidewalk and the parking.
It's pretty substantial.
And then from Frankfurt, vacated Frankfurt to the parking lot is 10 foot of space. And then at the corners, you can see that because of the geometry of the parking, that does expand an additional parking space width, so you do get a additional green buffer on the corners.
Andrew, I appreciate your pointing that out. Those are very germane. The 5 feet is the minimum, and it's only at St. Clair, and it is more generous elsewhere. But I'm still wondering about whether you would consider carving those corners out.
Pre-pandemic, West 6th Street was extremely lively with nightlife and a lot of pedestrians. Anything you can do to increase the pedestrians on this side of the street, I think would help that whole district out. It got to be too crowded on the west side because some of the outdoor seating encroaches pretty close to the curbs. And I know that the curb line changes at a certain point to make it wider, then it narrows down. So if they could increase this width here of any sort, add any kind of seating or other type of stations, it would really serve to help that district.
Yeah, that would be the same logic as the north side of Frankfurt, making that wider so that more people would be inclined to traverse that side of the street. So you can do that on the east side of 6th. I think that would help wherever you can. And just a note, those corner, we used to call them pocket parts in the warehouse district and looking at the public realm projects. Those were actually recommendations that we wanted to implement along for years now, is to be able to capture those little spaces. They would make a big difference.
I think the idea of using the corners is good, but I don't know why we're concerned about a couple of more spaces in a temporary parking lot. I mean, if we lost 5 or 6 spaces, and so what? It would do an awful lot, I think.
Where are you talking about losing 5 or 6 spaces?
Well, you could, on the St. Clair 6th corner, on the Frankfurt 6 corners, particularly on the Frankfurt on the Frankfurt West 6th Street on the north side, and on the St. Clair West 6th Street.
You don't really need 2 of those directly across from each other. If they just did Superior and West 6th, the south side of Frankfurt in West 6th, and St. Clair in West 6th, that would be a huge gain. Just those 3 small areas would be a tremendous give back.
It would certainly.
And it wouldn't cost them any cars.
I'm just greedy. I wanted more green space.
Yeah,
I would also like to point out that on the existing surface lot, on the garage block, along the West 6th side, we'd have reduced the number of parking spaces, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 new trees that are planted behind the existing trees. So we were really working to preserve those existing trees along West 6th, and then we carved out those parking spaces to create parking lot islands. So as you can see, there's kind of like 3 cars, then a tree, then 3 cars, then a tree. And
I'm not asking you to lose any trees or any cars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking you to move the fence and reconsider those 3 corners as vest pocket parks
So
Can you
just
say the third corner one more time? I see the Superior West 6th, the Frankfurt West 6th. Where was the final corner?
The final one is at St. Clair. It's not actually on the corner.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Okay.
It's just south of the corner. It would, it would be, don't make them lose the car, but just create a little indentation there. It's going to make the pedestrian experience of walking down West 6th way better.
And I want to reinforce, it's not just landscaping inside the fence, it's moving the fence line to allow people to interact with that, as opposed to, the trees in the parking lot are great.
That's the whole point, to move the fence.
Exactly. Thank you.
Tim, do you have any issue
Yes. So you're asking us to, just so I'm clear, you're asking us to move the fence back and basically open those up as public parks.
Yes.
Yeah. You have in the south side of Frankfurt at 6, you've got a green space right in the corner, right? Everybody can see that. Just move the fence to alongside the parking on the two sides.
Keep keep that 5-foot margin, but let it bend down. A re-entrant corner instead of a poking out. If I could draw on this drawing, I'd show you. I don't know if I can. Maybe Dro, you can. You understand what I'm talking about. Can you move your cursor to show what we're talking about?
Is
So
this
it's an
corner
inside
right?
corner instead of an outside
these-
corner.
Yes, that's one. Just like that. Then go up to Frankfurt and West 6th and do the same thing on the south side of Frankfurt.
Sorry, one moment. Right here?
Yes, yeah. Just pull that fence down and across. And then up at the upper one, just follow that triangle. Just bend it in and out.
Well, Jack, when you go up to St. Clair and West 6, that's a pretty important intersection. Why not give up 2 spaces and really make that corner nice? I mean, what do we care about 2 parking spaces?
Well, I don't know if Tim does or if he doesn't. It would be better if he did, but I'm trying to get him to move to do this.
Well, it's a temporary lot, end quotes, to start with. So, I mean, the spaces can't be there important. And I don't believe Sherwin-Williams needs the revenue. Really do something special. Open it up.
This is Jeff. I'm down in that district all the time. I was in the Hoyt Blackwood town for a while there. It really would be great if that could be a rectangular space on that corner instead of a triangle. I know it's a lot to ask, 1 or 2 spaces, but please review it.
So I don't particularly have a problem. The spaces really aren't the concern. It's taking what is our public property, or taking our private property and then converting it to a public park, in essence, and then trying to monitor that and having to police that part of it. I'm not sure that that's in alignment with what we've envisioned for this. I have no problem increasing the amount of green space. If you want to talk about, maybe some different options for the fencing, I don't have a problem with that. But, I'll be glad to maybe talk this over with our group. I mean, today I can't commit to basically dedicating our property for public use.
I understand why you would need to have that conversation, Tim. I appreciate that. But I do think that this would be a huge good thing for the city and for the pedestrians. And I don't know whether Director Hong knows if there is a way that the city could relieve you of any liability around it.
Jack,
I understand that concern.
Jack, I think there is a way to do that. I think there's a way to give the city a temporary easement so that liability is not a Sherwin-Williams issue, but the legal department. But I think we've explored that in other places. So I think there are ways to do it.
I'm sorry, but I have to say this. You got that plaza space in front of the pavilion. That's semi-public at this point. Those corners at best are going to be 20 feet by 20 feet. I'm my simple mind, I'm not getting the problem here. I'm sorry.
It is a big problem, and not everyone is in public square. There is a whole west side of West 6th Street. There is a whole other aspect of this neighborhood. While the focal point of the Sherwin-Williams project is, in fact, on public square, it is a four-sided site. It is not, you're not turning your back to the rest of the city here. And it is a very important place. And right now, it's just going to be a bunch of parking and uninterrupted. And anyone who is walking along that side of the site, it's not just a place to rest physically, it's a visual respite from what is happening all along that edge of the block. And, we have a responsibility to those people too. It's not enough to say that, we've made this incredible garden over at Public Square and we're done and we're turning our back on the rest of the city. These are four-sided blocks.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Muckley, just to insert in the conversation about the management of it, let's have a conversation with Downtown Cleveland Alliance about the management of those pocket parks, not necessarily about liability, but I think there's an opportunity to partner with Downtown Cleveland Alliance and our team, our Clean and Safe team, on maintaining those. So this is an important conversation and I appreciate raising it. And the pedestrian experience has always been a big part of this project as well as around the project and through the warehouse district. So let's figure out a way to make it happen and let's see if Downtown Cleveland Alliance can be a major part of that.
Let's broaden the conversation now to any other aspects of the landscape that people want to talk about.
Mr. Chair, this is Keith Brown. When we're talking about the fencing, we have some great examples around the city of more creative fencing than this. I mean, one being like Orchard School, Orchard Elementary over on West 41st and Orchard. And it's beautiful, and they dealt with the corners and the ends of the fencing in interesting and artistic ways.
Keith, I want to shut you down here because I don't think this is a question about spending money on beautiful fencing for what is potentially a temporary fence. I think this is a question about making more amenity for people who are actually walking here, and the fence. I think what the fence design is the least of our worries here. Let's talk about any other aspects of the landscape plan that people want to discuss.
Jack, it's Tom Zarfas again. Just a couple comments on the pavilion garden area. It does seem in this town, winter lasts a lot longer than summer. I would like to see what this thing looks like in January. I think it's a fair question to ask. Perennial gardens are nothing in January, and there's an opportunity here to do some things, and they're already starting to do it with lighting, with signage, with maybe some public art. I don't know, but I'd just like to see what it looks like in January. I think it's a fair question. We always like to show these things when they're going to look their best, which is typically in the summer when you're a landscape architect. I'd like to see it in winter.
Jamie,
you asked my question for me. Thanks.
Jamie, do you want to talk to us about what you think the garden will look like? And maybe we could go to, are there interesting tree structures and, without leaves? Are there sculptural aspects of what this planting plan is? Could we go to a rendering of the color garden?
In fairness to Jamie, it's pretty hard for her to do everything.
Well, she knows what the planting is.
But I think it goes well beyond planting. But anyway, go ahead.
An actual rendering, not a site plan, if you have it. Thank you.
The rendering doesn't sort of one-to-one depict the planting, so I don't know how helpful this is to everyone, but
okay, well, is there something else that we should look at?
I mean, I do think, you know, Tom's not wrong, and we're very aware of that. We live here too. But, and, you know, that was part of our, you know, real initiative to think about as far into the spring as we can get things blooming, and as far into the winter as we can keep things blooming. And also, you know, really making sure that there is this kind of matrix of evergreens that support that whole system, so that the beds aren't just bare mulch all winter. We've tried to kind of, I mean, if the witch hazels are kind of a lovely multi-stem tree. They have a very kind of beautiful, delicate branching, and then the tulip poplars, which are along the rest of the front here, are a very kind of upright, very erect, kind of stately tree. We think that will be very nice, but yeah, we all live in Cleveland, we know. I actually think the turf here is going to help, because you will have, you know, it's not 100% planted, that there is a decent amount of turf here, and that does stay green most of the year.
Isn't there some grade here too? You have some rolling, a little bit of.
You know, it's a very little bit behind the walls, but that's not something I think you're particularly going to see from most people's point of view.
How is this, Jamie? How is this different from how people perceive the garden across the street in the winter?
The garden across the street in the winter, I don't think has any evergreen component. I'm trying to remember if I'm correct. And part of the restriction on that is if you go 100% natives, we don't have a lot of native evergreens. And that was really what they were trying to achieve there. This, because of all the other restrictions, we did not restrict ourselves to only natives. But I mean, it is very similar, although to be fair, I think Public Square has a lot more, you know, it has that architectural, the big structural pieces, and the curves and the.
Have you guys thought about any other, you do have an art piece obviously in your monument sign of sorts. Have you thought about any other potential sculpture in this garden?
I think that's a question for Tim.
Chair Bylowski, yes, we have. And Julie Young, who had to drop off, she actually has been, you know, we've been having some discussions with Land Studio. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I fully anticipate incorporating with the landscaping, we will have some type of public art. Just, I don't think we know what that is today.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so now, does anyone else want to talk about the landscaping from the combined committees?
Hey, Tom Yablonsky. I just want to. I know I took Tom Zarfos's point. Well, we have a time of the year where this is not going to be spectacular, but too often for projects, people have taken that as an excuse not to make the times of the year when it can be spectacular. So I really want to applaud them on the multi-colored garden, and it's really going to be a maintenance issue. And I would actually say with climate change, we have way more times of the year they're getting warmer than getting colder. But that's a personal scientific opinion. But anyway, I want to applaud them of doing this, and then if we can enhance it with some evergreen or sculpture things, all the better. But this is one of the best examples I've seen of you know, maximizing the color palette.
I would echo that.
I'd like to reiterate that too. Sorry.
One at a time, everybody. Go ahead, weigh in. Director Hong, were you trying to say something?
I was just trying to reiterate the very same point that I felt that the color palette, the rainbow, the intentionality behind the different plantings, and I just think they did a really great job. You know, I think we can work on the winterscape. We can work on it with Sherwin with regard to public art, but I just want to commend them on the effort.
Just to reinforce what Tom said, maintenance will be the key. The renderings are beautiful. But it's going to take some time and effort to keep them looking as good as when they're originally planting or in full bloom.
Mr. Chair, Greg also has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, I don't know if I mean, I think that the landscaping is beautiful. I had a more general comment that was just about, this has been very well thought through from the point of Sherwin-Williams functional needs. But this, campus, and I hate calling urban projects campuses because the word itself just puts out there that there's a separation from the context of the city, which there shouldn't be because this crosses 3 blocks. And so all these conversations that we've been having kind of go back to, I think that it needs to be rethought through like the needs of citizens utilizing public spaces and sidewalks. And just one example is like, how often should there be a bench? Because, older people might need to stop and sit down. Or, what are the zones of the sidewalk that you should consider? So you have a curb zone so people can get in and out of cars or parallel park, have an amenity strip where you can have trees and signage and stuff. And then is the sidewalk wide enough to accommodate, as many people as are anticipated for that? And where we need more room, then do we use pavers or a tree grate instead of a planting bed around the tree so that the sidewalk can be expanded? And I just think that, all those things just need to be maybe reviewed through once more. And also, this is a beautiful garden. At the very least, there should be some sort of benching maybe on the perimeter of the property that is like two-faced so that you can sit on either side and enjoy this and not just have to walk by it.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the comments. And I think it's also why Sherwin-Williams has assembled first-class consultants to advise them relative to all of those issues. But we are, in fact, the guardians of the public trust. So I know that we have given you a lot of constructive criticism today, Tim. I hope also that you will accept our appreciation for all of the incredible effort and how great we know that you're working to make this. I think that this too should be tabled. I don't think that it will affect your overall schedule, and I think that the issues around this, I'd like to give you the opportunity to go back to talk to your own team at Sherwin and your consultant team to consider all of the things that have been spoken about today. This is an incredible intervention in the city. It's going to be here for a really, really long time. And I just think it's worth the time to make sure that we get it all right. Are you okay with that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I think from a design standpoint, I'm not sure that, obviously we want to continue to move through this process and get these things finalized, but I'm not sure that it would be holding up anything at this point. I just throw that back to Matt and Bill. Is there anything that we would need approval on to keep moving forward with design?
Yep. No.
This is Jeff Bogart. I'll make that motion.
No, hang on, Jeff. We're waiting to hear from Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he responded. I thought I heard him.
Yeah, we're in agreement with Tim.
Okay.
So Jack, just so I want to make sure that I captured the main issues. So what we're going back to take a look at are bike lanes, potentially increasing the tabletop, installation of park benches. Is there different fencing options? And then the one that's going to be the hardest one is creating public space at the corners on West 6th Street.
Right, you've got all of them.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'll make the motion that we table this segment of the review.
Which is for landscaping.
For landscaping and
hardscape.
Hardscape, thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comment, question, concern, consideration from the combined panel? Hearing none, Dro, I would ask you to call the roll.
just to confirm the motion, the motion is to table to consider, and I'll also be going through the recording to make sure we get this down to the T, but consider the pocket parks on the corners, including moving the fence, considering the hardscape over on Frankfurt east of that service alley. And I don't know if I got a concrete idea for the landscaping section that I'm missing, but I just want to note the comments so that the commissions tomorrow know why it was tabled and what ideas
Okay,
were.
let's ask Tim to do it again because he had written it down and he has it right.
So consider the installation of bike lanes along Frankfurt Avenue. Increase the table.
I'm sorry, it was a little more than that, right? I believe.
Well, let me run through the 5 that I have, and then we can circle back. So I had, consider installation of bike lanes along Frankfurt. Look at increasing the tabletop width. There's existing tabletop. Look at bringing that back to almost the loading dock area. Installation of park benches throughout the site. Other fencing options that should be considered than what was presented, and then the pocket parks. Those were the 5 things that I captured it correctly.
Okay.
I think that's right. I want to ask, who was it?
Hey, Jack, can I make one modification there? I don't think they have to necessarily be park benches. I think there could be seating walls, and so it's a little diverse. Let's be creative with what the seating options are.
Provide opportunity for seating throughout the site in strategic locations, taking into consideration security concerns as well as public amenity.
I would also like to amend the bike lanes when I think it's more about bike ped accommodation, whether it's striping or sharrows or what have you. It's a little bit broader than that.
Not just bike lanes.
On
Are
Frankfurt.
Are you clear on that, Dro?
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted it also cleared with the committee too. Okay, so
is there,
the motion
Director
is to
Hahn,
table.
do we have everything that was in your mind as well?
Yes, I believe that covers everything.
Thank you. Okay, Dro.
Bylowski.
Yes.
Benton.
Yes.
Bogart.
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Geist.
Yes.
Long.
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
Katsarchik.
Yes.
Soltis.
Yes.
Yablonsky.
Yes.
Zarfos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. I want to thank everyone for their patience. I want to thank the Sherwin-Williams team for extraordinary effort, and thank the design review and historic downtown district people, everyone, for your patience and for your thoughtful consideration of such an important project. And to let Tim and his team know that we're, they clearly, I know they'll take advantage of Director Hong's offer to facilitate and coordinate with them relative to those issues. And as always, we're available to speak offline if needed. So thank you, everyone. Drew, unless there's any other reason, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
No. I
Okay.
think that covers it.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Great job.